Delegates, can I call Congress to order? Thank you. Thank you. Many thanks once again to Musica Colne Valley Senior Guitars who've been playing for us whilst we were coming in this afternoon. Congress, I now call upon Linda McCulloch, the Chair of the General Purposes Committee, to report to us on the progress of business and other Congress arrangements. Linda.
Good afternoon, Congress. I can report that one outstanding composite of motions 10 and 12 on nationalisation of Britain's railways has been agreed. I can also report that the General Purposes Committee has approved a further 4 emergency motions. Emergency motion number 5 on RBS bank closures will be moved by Unite and seconded by Accord. Emergency motion 6 on support national unity demonstration against fascism and racism on Saturday, November the 17th, will be moved by the UCU and seconded by PCS. Emergency motion 7 on fair pays in school will be moved by the NEU and seconded by the NASUWT. Emergency motion 8 on public service pensions will be moved by the SOR and seconded by the FBU. The President will advise when it's hoped to take these emergency motions. Congress, the President has also received a letter from former President Lula from his prison cell in Brazil. The GPC has agreed the letter will be read out to Congress tomorrow by our international visitor representing the HUT in Brazil, Antonio Lisboa. I will report further on progress of business and other GPC decisions when necessary through Congress. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Congress, in her report, Linda said this. So if you could just keep an eye on what I'm saying, because there's quite a lot of new business. Composite motion 17, nationalisation of Britain's railways, to be moved by RMT, seconded by TSSA. This composite is scheduled to be taken tomorrow afternoon. So that's motion 17 tomorrow afternoon. Emergency motion 5, RBS bank closures in the name of Unite, and seconded by Accord. Emergency motion 6, support national unity demonstration against fascism and racism, Saturday the 17th of November, in the name of UCU, seconded by PCS. Emergency motion 7, fair pay in schools in the name of NEU, seconded by NASUWT. Emergency motion 8, public services pensions in the name of the Society of Radiographers, seconded by the FBU. All of those, I'll let you know when I hope to be able to take these and other emergency motions. So that then leads me neatly into my reminder to you again to ensure that in order to get through business, it's important to respect the speaking times, 5 minutes for moving a motion and 3 minutes for seconding a motion for all other speakers. We've been notified by a lot of unions who want to speak in debates this afternoon, which means that we're very tight on time and we've got some really important debates. That being the case, I'm just going to give fair warning up front rather than leave it till later. What I'll do is I'll prioritise unions who are movers and seconders of motions or parties to composites. I'll try and get everyone in, but if I can't, please bear with me because I won't be able to call all speakers. On my right, I have Sheila Bearcroft from the GMB, who is hardcore on the button, okay? I just want to give you warning. I brought in the serious troops for this. So, that being said, I'm sure we'll get through it. Delegates, let's start this afternoon with Section 5 of the General Council report, Strong Unions, the section on young workers, that's page 60. I call paragraphs 5.3, 3.16 And motion 74, make 2019 the year for young workers. The General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by Kendall Bromley Bewes on behalf of the Young Workers Conference and seconded by the GMB. Can I have other speakers unite CWU, PCS and NAS to the front, please? Thank you. Please, absolutely. The floor is absolutely yours.
President, Congress, Kendall Bromley Bewes, moving motion 74, making 2019 the year of young workers, on behalf of the TUC Young Workers Forum. Congress, this is now the third time I'm moving this motion. The first time I moved this motion was at the TUC Young Workers Congress back in March, and the second time was at Unison's National Delegate Conference back in June. Both motions unanimously passed, and now I'm moving this motion for the third and final time. Now, some history to where this motion came from. My Unison Vice Chair and I were discussing young members within unions and how we need to not only recruit more young members, but get more young members active. We had all these big ideas and finally settled on the idea of a year specifically focused around young members. It snowballed, and after 18 months of hard work, here we are. With members beginning to retire and leave work, we do not have the members in the young membership to replace these numbers. Research has shown that if you don't join a union by the time you're 25, you are much less likely to join one later in life. This is just one of the reasons why this year is so important. The TUC and all of its affiliated unions need to take an organisational-wide approach to the year, with engagement from branches, regions, national committees, service groups and self-organised groups. We want more young members involved in the democracy of the service groups and self-organised groups. Young member focus in terms of upcoming projects and research, and most importantly, we want young people to feel that they have a voice in our unions. Whenever I start a discussion with a young, non-unionised person, I get the same responses over and over again. They don't know what a union is, they don't know its purpose, and they certainly don't feel it's a place for them. Congress, I've had enough of hearing this time and time again. We need to be active, organising our young people so they know that the union plays a vital role at work, which they need to play a part in. We need to stop acting as gatekeepers. We need to help mentor young members and bring them up through our democratic systems. We need to be flexible and aware that if the unions want to attract more young people, changes will need to be made. This change can't just be in the young member forums. This change is union-wide. We need to evaluate ourselves, take a step back and say, are we fit for purpose? Are we a union that young people can join and get active in any structure? Congress, I can't emphasise enough the need to not just listen to this motion. Treat it as a call to arms. This is all of our work. We can't afford to not act. Every single person in this room must take action. We must go back to our unions nationally, regionally, and most importantly, at branch level, and formulate a cohesive plan, which means that we take charge and lead the way. We want each union to adapt the year to what works for them, to fully maximise engagement in our workplaces. I'm not saying that this is going to be easy. It will take resourcing, financing and organising. But we are the union movement. If we can't pull this off, then no one can. We are not just the future of our unions. We are the present. We are not a commodity. We are here and we are ready to stand up and fight for what's important to us. Young members are on the march. Join us, stand with us, and together, side by side, let's preserve, protect, and promote the future of our unions. Thank you. Support the motion.
Thank you, Kendall. Brilliantly moved. Can that be seconded now by the GMB? Thank you.
President, Congress, Charlie Gray, GMB, seconding motion 74, make 2019 the year of the young workers. Congress, like many young people, I work a 0 hours contract. I have no regular income, and even when I do have hours, because of my age, I'm not even paid the so-called national living wage. For more and more young workers, this is our reality of the world of work. Increasingly insecure, underpaid and undervalued. Young workers have the most to gain from joining a union and becoming organised. But with all this said, you'd expect young workers to be joining unions for protection. but only 15% of people under the age of 30 are members of a union. Young people just aren't engaged by trade unions, and we are told time and time again that our movement is ageing. The more young people that join unions, the more we learn about not just the world of work for young people and how we attract young workers to our movement. We learn about what bosses want to do to the whole economy, how they want to casualise and individualise our work, and how they want to play with our rights. We have to bring in more young workers to maintain and strengthen our collective power. GMB now organised with the National Society of Apprentices, reaching young people when they start out their working lives. And we are organising student union workers, who are students, yes, but are working to fund their education. Many students like me are workers too. We need to innovate and try new ways of reaching young workers, but never lose sight of the fact that young workers are indeed workers. Our organisation of young workers has to revolve around the workplace, new methods and new ways of making change, with our ideas and our principles at the heart of this organising agenda. Congress, I'll finish by saying this: let's make 2019 the year of the young worker and invest in increasing membership and organisation of young workers and secure the future of our movement. Congress, I second the motion.
Thank you, GMB. May I have Unite? You'll be followed by the CWU.
Congress President Tony Davis, first-time delegate, speaking in support of this motion for Unite the Union. Congress, I want to speak today to give you my own example of what young people will be left with if we don't succeed in bringing them into the trade union movement. Whenever phrases such as industrial strategy are debated, the question of skills and apprenticeships is never far behind. Traditionally, high-quality apprenticeships were supposed to be an alternative, but equivalent to a higher education qualification, a pathway to a high-skilled, well-paid job, a secure job. But Congress, this is not what young people are being offered. And an example that was beyond satire, I was employed, if that's the correct term, by an apprenticeship farm. It was a firm that produced nothing. It served no one. It offered nothing. It was a firm that made all of its profit from offering young people bogus apprenticeships. Not a pathway to a career, but a dead end to nowhere. It took a further 2 apprenticeships and unstable workplaces to finally find a non-exploitative one. This Congress is what happens when only 4.7% of young workers under 25 are in a trade union. This is what happens when young people don't have the collective strength to raise standards and win security, certainty and hope for a decent future. Congress, this is the age of the zero-hour contract, and the root cause of this exploitation is the fact that young workers are far less likely to be trade union members than the previous generation. The ideas of trade unionism do not spread by summoning magic. They spread like wildfire when they respond to the needs of the hour. Congress, let us declare 2019 to be the year of the young worker. Let's commit ourselves to the eradication of zero-hour contracts, commit ourselves to the end of precarious work, commit ourselves to our historic promise of securing a better future for our workers. Congress, support this motion.
Thank you. CWU? Then it will be PCS.
President Congress, Fiona Curtis on behalf of CWU supporting this motion. The trade union movement is now facing a generational crisis, which if uncorrected threatens its very existence. As figures from the TUC demonstrate, among young workers who are 30 and under, trade union membership levels are just 15.7%. Most young workers are not against trade unions. They simply don't understand them and don't know how they can help them. The majority of my friends just thought a trade union was there for you if you got into trouble at work. They weren't aware or educated in what trade unions can do, and what they have achieved over the years. This motion is so important as we so badly need to get more young workers involved within trade unions. We need young people to gain the experience and knowledge that many of you already have. We need to be able to carry on all the amazing work trade unions have achieved. We have achieved the weekend, pay increases, terms and conditions. This list is not exhaustive. I am lucky to be part of a union which they encourage young workers. In our constitution, we have young workers involved at all levels, branch, regionally and nationally. I am part of the National Young Workers Committee and have been elected as the Vice Chair. So with this position, I get to attend industrial executive meetings and can have a say on what our concerns and issues are for our 17,500 young members. I believe we need to look outside of the box and not conform to how we have always done things. We need to be innovating and have fresh ideas to encourage our young workers. Our young workers need now, more than ever, to be involved within trade unions. Our world is changing rapidly, and we have artificial intelligence growing, companies wanting to exploit to make the most money possible, and companies dividing and fragmenting our workplaces through different terms and conditions, and contracts and pensions. Making 2019 the Year of Young Workers is an opportunity to engage, encourage, and empower within our trade union movement.
And then I have the NAS-UWT. So PCS, is that you? Yeah, the floor's yours.
Ria James, PCS. Congress. I look around here today and I see the vast disproportion of young workers' representation. This needs to change. This highlights the vital need and importance of this motion. PCS supports the call for designating 2019 as the Year for Young Workers, and we welcome the opportunity to work with other unions, both locally and nationally, to raise awareness of issues our young members face and encourage our young workers to join the union and to get them active within their unions. I am proud to be a young member in the Young Members Network, which PCS has developed over the years. I'm proud to have had the opportunities I've had within PCS. Our aim in PCS is to positively identify young workers and to encourage these members into getting involved in their union. We have created regional networks which allow space for young members to get to know one another and to introduce those younger people to the relevance of trade unions. The work of our young activists has regularly been recognised by the TUC annual awards. More importantly, many hundreds of our young members who became involved in the union through the PCS Young Members Network have gone on to take up elected and full-time union positions. Our aim is to increase the visibility and vibrancy of PCS amongst young workers. In this civil service, where our union organise, the government have committed to creating 25,000 apprentices roles up to 2020. Clearly, this is a huge opportunity for our union to recruit and organise, but it is also going to be a real test, both for our union and for the trade union movement generally. Our experience is that young people entering the world of work are not generally aware of trade unions, and they aren't either aware of how to join them. However, we have to get away from the debate in trade union circles, which often ends up blaming young people for not joining trade unions. What is absolutely clear is that young people are politically aware and passionate about the causes that matter to them. Young workers are media savvy and know how to use the tools of social media to mobilise and organise. We need to look no further than the anti-gun campaigns led by Young People's Trump in America. It is lazy and wrong to say that young people are not interested in acting collectively or are politically disinterested. Young workers have plenty to be angry about, with zero-hour contracts, job insecurity, poor pay, access to training at work, bullying in the workplace, lack of promotion opportunities, and sexual harassment. Our job as trade unionists is to make sure that trade unions are relevant to young people and that our representative structures allow for a space for young people. We have to face some hard truths as well. Young people don't always want to come to union meetings that are heavy in bureaucracy and light in action. So in PCS, we recognise there is a real issue in ensuring that trade unions are relevant to young workers. And in doing so, that issues that impact on young workers are acknowledged by trade unions, and that young workers are given a space and support to develop and run their own campaigns, because we truly have a lot to learn. PCS therefore supports the call for a year dedicated to young workers and the issues they face, recognising that this needs to be a year of activity which is supported by all trade unions and which is led and shaped by young workers themselves. We believe that that unions should be encouraged to set challenging targets for the year which demonstrate the underrepresentation of young workers in our movement is being addressed. The survival of our movement is at stake if we do not take action. Congress support the motion.
Thank you, PCS. NASUWT?
President, Congress, Alan Hackett, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, speaking in support of motion 74. The NASUWT welcomes and supports this motion. Building a strong and resilient movement for the future requires urgent and strategic action on recruiting and organising young workers. Survey information from this year's TUC Equality Audit shows that there is a huge gap in union density between young and older workers. Only 4% of members from affiliated unions are aged 25 or under. 4% of 6 million members makes uncomfortable reading. Congress, this is a worrying trend, one that requires action for all unions. However, this problem is indicative of the current situation facing our young workers. Young workers that are facing considerable challenges, such as job insecurity, low and unfair pay, and social exclusion, primarily due to government reforms. Congress, job security for young workers is a serious and significant problem throughout the UK. With over a decade of wage cuts and austerity, many young people are facing a financial crisis. Rising levels of job insecurity and temporary and zero-hour contracts are denying young people access to financial security, which would enable them to secure mortgages or to secure a home of their own. As a teachers' union, we are particularly concerned about the situation facing young teachers. Year after year at our Young Teachers conferences and events, we hear the worrying stories of teachers who are struggling financially as the pay within the teaching profession becomes increasingly uncompetitive with other graduate sectors. These are young professionals who are unable to access affordable housing, subjected to temporary employment contracts, and unable to meet basic needs such as utility bills, rent and mortgage. When surveyed, 39% of teachers at the NASUWT Young Members Conference said that they still live with their parents because they couldn't afford a place of their own. As well as worries about housing, these young teachers raised concerns about the lack of ability to plan financially for the future, with over half, 56%, saying that they are not confident that this was achievable. My union has raised concern about the growing number of young teachers who are forced out of contributing to their pensions, making difficult decisions about what is affordable on a monthly basis. Congress, the NASUWT wholeheartedly supports the call for an intensive and focused campaign for young workers, alongside the excellent work that the TUC Young Campaigners Forum has undertaken. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you very much. Kendall, I've heard absolutely no one oppose your motion. You look upset by that. Everyone wants this year to be the year of 2019 and young people. Kendall's upset, but anyway, would Congress please come to a vote on this? All those in favour of 2019 being the year of young people, as moved by the Youth Conference? All in favour? Thank you. All those against? On your third time, your motion's passed. Well done. We now move on. Congress, following that debate, we now move to a really important special feature, reaching out to young workers and union organising. It's a key area of our campaigning work, and I'd like to welcome I'd like to welcome Craig Dawson, General Counsel Lead on Young Workers, to introduce this work. You're there. Welcome, Craig.
Good afternoon, Congress. In a moment, I will introduce the brilliant organising work our unions are doing. But before that, I want to talk to you about our biggest challenge, reaching out to the next generation of union members and activists. The young reps we're about to hear from are unfortunately in the minority. Less than 8% of workers aged between 16 and 24 are in a trade union. That's not because the jobs that young workers do are well paid with fantastic conditions, even though I wish that was the case. For many young workers, it's the opposite, in fact. So 2 years ago, Congress decided that had to change. That together we would recommit to being a movement for and of young workers. Indeed, if we are to survive Congress, we must become that movement. At last year's Congress, we heard about the TUC's fantastic research into the lives of young workers and what they need from unions. That research told us that lots of young workers don't realise that they've got problems at work. Being poorly treated is all they've ever known, so they think that this is just what work is like. They aren't familiar with unions or what we do, quite frankly. That if they take a stand and demand change, that they'll just be ignored. And the way the workplace has changed means that they don't think they can trust their colleagues, let alone work with them to improve things. All of that is hard to hear, but there were some bright spots where what unions can offer matched up to what younger workers wanted. Our movement has a long and proud history of supporting workers to get on in life. We've always been a platform for working people to build their skills. So our first priority is to offer young workers something they want, that they're interested in. Then we need to bring down the barriers to collective bargaining and offer young workers the chance to join a trade union. So this year, the TUC is piloting a new app called WorkSmart. It's a virtual career coach for young workers. For us, it's the beginning of a relationship with these young workers, and the end goal is getting them to join trade unions. Through WorkSmart, we'll show them that unions are here for them, that we know about the world of work, and that we can help them get on. And while they are with us, we'll be pushing union messages, helping young workers wake up to the problems in their workplaces and building their belief that by getting together with other workers in a union, things can change. But don't take my word for it.
WorkSmart is a new career coach app designed specifically for younger workers. We know that we need to get better at reaching younger workers, and to do that we need to listen to younger workers themselves. And so with WorkSmart, we went out around the country and we heard from hundreds of them, hundreds of young workers telling us their stories, the context of their lives, the problems they're facing at work, and in particular the barriers that stand between them and trade unions.
My name is Mishi. I'm a registered manager of a mental health facility in Watford. When I first started out, confidence was a bit of an issue. I wasn't aware that trade unions existed. I found out about it, so I went back to my employer and said, hey, can we join one? And he said no.
My name is James. I am 22 and I work in retail management. When I've asked for the development and to be taught more or to try and increase the skills I have, it's either been denied or promised to come at a later date, which never happens.
WorkSmart adds something to our toolbox as the trade union movement. There's already some fantastic work going on right across the movement, but we can always get better. We've been testing and learning throughout this whole journey with WorkSmart, and we're not going to stop now.
I love WorkSmart. I think it's a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant creation.
Even being part of the research, I felt more motivated to get the information I need to develop my skills. I got home and I realised, oh wow, I actually need something like this to help me.
It's so simplified and easy to use, but it's full of information that's helpful and can be used to make such a big difference.
Thank you. I'm so excited by the potential of WorkSmart, and although it's early days, the success of the early results too. But of course, WorkSmart isn't a silver bullet, and it sits alongside the brilliant work our unions are doing day in and day out. Here to tell you about just two of those examples are Nick and Joanne.
Good afternoon, Congress. I'm Nick from FR Unite, the Ryanair branch of Unite. I've been flying for over 10 years with Ryanair, and I do love my job. But up until last December, the company refused to recognise unions. By working closely with Unite, we slowly started to build our membership, and in June we won recognition from Ryanair. And it was a fantastic feeling when all our hard work had paid off. It's a new experience for everyone involved, and I look forward to a productive working relationship with all parties, now that we're off the starting blocks. It's been an honour to address Congress this year, a year that marks both our recognition and year 150th anniversary. Thank you so much for this honour. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joanne and I work as a domestic assistant at Wigan Hospital. Earlier this year, Wigan, Rattington and Lee NHS Trust tried to move my job, along with nearly 900 of my colleagues, to a private company. They didn't think we would question this, but they underestimated us. They wanted to move us out of the NHS so they could dodge VAT, robbing other public services of vital funding. I am proud to work for the NHS and didn't want to be transferred out against my will. And we weren't going to allow the people's NHS to be taken from them. All of my colleagues agreed. We were not prepared to allow our jobs to be privatised. We are some of the lowest paid staff in the NHS. We are domestics, porters, maintenance and catering staff. But together we took a stand. In total, we took 9 days of strike action and we won. The trust backed down. We were ecstatic. All the hard work paid off. All the stress was worth it. We are proof that if you stand together, if you organise, if you keep strong, you too can win. Thank you.
Well done, guys. So thank you both for that. That was fantastic. These campaigns and so many others prove the strength of younger workers joining up and standing together to fight for better conditions, fairer pay and decent treatment. Between the power of organising and new approaches like Work Smart, I'm confident we can and we will organise a whole new generation of young workers. Thank you, Congress.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who's been involved in that really exciting work. Delegates, we move to section 4 of the General Council report, Good Services. That's from page 48. I call paragraph 4.2 and composite motion number 8, Public Sector. The General Council support the composite motion. It's to be moved by the NAHT, seconded by the NEU, supported by FDA. I've got CWU and Unite listed to speak. If everyone could come to the front, please.
President Congress, Paul Whiteman from NAHT, moving Composite 8. I'm grateful to colleagues from the NEU and the FDA for their helpful amendments to the original motion. Colleagues, the story in education is similar to the story across public service. Schools have suffered real-term cuts that amount to a shortfall of over £2 billion per year. The Institute of Fiscal Studies and the National Audit Office agree that the cuts are real, despite the rhetoric from government. Now, we've been trading statistics with government on this for a while, but the statistics hide the human tragedy. The NAHT, along with colleagues in the NEU, other unions and parent groups, have relentlessly pursued government by telling the human stories about the most vulnerable children in the need of one-to-one support from teaching assistants that can no longer be provided, about the narrowing of the curriculum and the lost subjects, children no longer getting the full education that they need and that they deserve, about the often substandard and sometimes questionable conditions in which children have to learn, and about the lack of support for children suffering a mental health crisis. Now, our campaign has been about the potential damage to children. We've not put much focus on the effects on teachers, school leaders and other colleagues within school. And that's a testament to the dedication of the profession. But the profession has suffered. School leaders having to make truly heartbreaking decisions about what to cut, having to watch colleagues deal with intolerable pressure and intolerable working hours, having to witness that dedication taken for granted by government and the personal cost at which that comes. And there are no riches in any of this. The profession has suffered real terms pay cuts of 15% since 2010. But despite it all, when I go into schools, I can see the success. I can feel the enthusiasm, and school leaders and teachers still tell me that teaching is the best job in the world on a good day. And that's because leaders, teachers and support colleagues, on the whole, find a way to muddle through. But that cohesion is under pressure. That common sense of purpose is at risk. Now, the pay award for teachers this year was touted as a fully funded, inflation-busting 3.5%. But when you look behind the headline, you find that it's only partially funded and only 40% of the profession might see 3.5%. The majority seeing much, much less, and school leaders 1.5%. The award departs significantly from the recommended award from the review body. And the departure is designed by government to rank those who it sees as most important for this year, and it doesn't even ensure that enough money will make it to the front line to guarantee that even the suggested awards are made. Now, the government will claim that schools have immense freedom to operate and that success is in their hands, seeking to shift the blame for the ensuing chaos. But theoretical freedom cannot be real unless real funding exists. The profession will do its best, it always does. But as we discover that schools are now at the end of the solutions list and that leaders are expected to make decisions that they do not support, believe to be wrong and damaging, we must ensure that the blame rests with the creators of chaos, government, not the leadership of schools who are simply trying to navigate a course through the crisis. I know that similar tensions exist across public services. Leaders and managers are not feeding the bottom line or the shareholder dividend. Their public service ethos is no more and no less than that of colleagues. The motion does not ask for any example of bad management to be forgiven or to be forgotten. It simply asks that in the best traditions of trade unionism, we place the blame where it belongs and we campaign together and stand for a brighter future. Congress, please support the motion.
Thank you, NAHT. NEU?
President, Congress. Josie Whiteley, National Education Union, seconding the motion. The NEU has many thousands of members in leadership and management positions who find themselves in difficult situations daily. Although our joint union's campaign has won more money for education, it's nowhere near enough. And union members are having to make difficult decisions to best limit the damage of government cuts. How on earth do you decide where the axe should fall? Will the outcome be larger classes or fewer teaching hours for students or a heavier workload for staff? A decade ago, it was easy to see which leaders had a clear moral purpose. But now lines are much more blurred, and leaders who are essentially principled individuals find themselves cornered into making impossible decisions. Our leadership members tell us they feel really strongly about the importance of shared core values and beliefs, and that their staff and students deserve the best. To help them with creating a positive workplace culture, we established our Whole Care Code of Leadership Practice, and it's freely downloadable from our website for anyone who wants to have a read. The feedback's been really positive from our members, who feel the code has offered useful guidance in how they can retain ethical behaviour during difficult times. Our more recently qualified members have also fed into this code because they understand that training in the early stages of their career in the principles of ethical leadership is essential for all aspiring leaders, as well as for those already in position. Leaders set the tone and they lead the way for their workforce teams, and very often, like us, we mustn't forget they are members of unions and we must support them. Wherever you work, you'd always choose to have a good manager, someone with great communication skills and who has integrity and inspires confidence, unlike those who make up our current government. The kinds of peoples we would want to encourage to be leaders in our schools and colleges, however, can be reluctant to take on the responsibility in a climate where resources are scarce, accountability is so high, and the blame is freely attributed to them, even though they've not been given the tools to do the job. And this means we miss out on a lot of potential talent in ethical leadership in our workplaces. However, I want to tell you that there is some hope, because education leaders are now speaking out. For example, just last week, they hit out at the government's latest attempt to stop them from going public, stating they must not comment on education funding because it's political. How dare they? Leaders have got a moral duty to speak out when they can see the government's dogma-driven approach to education is causing so much damage. Last year, head teachers marched to Parliament, and further action is planned later this month. So unions and the TUC need to support leaders and encourage them to continue to do this, to put their heads up above the parapet on behalf of all of us and to say enough is enough. Leaders and workers can work together in solidarity against the government's appalling treatment of the public services we all need. Congress, I second this motion and urge you to support.
Thank you very much. I have the FDA. I'll follow that by the CWU and Unite, and then we will move to rights to reply if we're needing them.
Thank you. Fiona Eady, FDA. I'm speaking in support of the motion so powerfully moved by the NAHT and NEU. Much will be said during Congress about the devastating consequences of cuts to public services, stories about the working poor, the increased demand on state provision, and the uncertain spectre of Brexit looming. It's not a pretty picture, Congress, and it's hard to imagine a more challenging time in recent years for public services or to be a public servant. The public sector professionals that my union represents across the civil service see the damage being wreaked upon public services every day. The resources available to them are shrinking in real terms, just as the pressure and demands upon them grow daily. We are happy to support this motion and to call upon the government to stand up to its responsibility to every citizen of the UK. Our members are in no way immune to the effects of public service cuts, because no one is. They have to deal with the consequences of cuts. It adds to the pressure on their teams, it impacts on the morale of their staff, and it damages their own mental health and well-being. All public servants, irrespective of grade, are damaged by austerity politics. It cheapens their endeavour and it destroys the trust developed over many years with the wider public. FDA members rely on public services because everyone in society does. We rely on those colleagues here from the health service, the education unions, from local government. Cuts are cuts, Congress, and they affect us all. Every day, we hear stories of public service managers struggling with increased workloads and having that compounded by the lack of affordable childcare, increased travel costs, or sky-high care fees for older relatives. Political impartiality is a cornerstone of the civil service in the UK, and the persistent attacks on the impartiality and professionalism of civil servants cannot and will not be tolerated. Civil servants are the backbone that keep our country going, and they are consistently under attack, including by their own ministers, for doing their jobs. Something that will be familiar to everyone in this hall is that when public service unions highlight the real damage caused by the cuts, they face the wrath from parts of the media and from politicians who try to point the finger of blame, not where it's deserved, with those who make the decisions, but instead with those tasked merely with implementing the will of ministers. Congress, please support the motion and make clear that all workers are genuinely in it together. Thank you.
Thank you. CWU.
President Conference, Mark Welsh, Communication Workers Union, representing workers within the communications industry. Our members on a daily basis see the effects of austerity in our communities because we deliver those services, whether it's letters, parcels or broadband into those areas. We see firsthand the issues that austerity and the cuts to public services and what they're making to our communities. Indeed, a small group of our members still work in the public service. Since the 2011 Postal Services Act, which separated Royal Mail and the Post Office, the long-term viability of both services has been in doubt. Whilst the former has endured privatisation, the latter remains in public hands. However, this has been little safeguard against cutbacks and a decline in the viability of the network, which, according to a 2016 YouGov survey conducted on behalf of the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, believed it had a social value of up to 9.7 billion. At the end of 2012, the 5-year guarantee to protect Crown officers expired, the first time it had done so since the Postal Services Act. At this point, there were 373 Crown officers. Subsequently, between January 2016 and January 2017, the Post Office announced that it would be franchising or closing a combined total of 99 flagship Crown Post Offices. The first tranche of franchising and closures was announced on the 19th of January 2016. In this instance, 39 Crown offices were listed to be franchised. And whilst 3 were closed, a total of around 400 jobs were negatively impacted. In this case, around 150 jobs were affected. This was followed again in January 2017 with the announcement that a further 37 Crown offices would be closing, which would again affect up to 300 jobs. At the same time, the company terminated the cessation of the financial specialist role, resulting in another loss of jobs of 127 and a wealth of experience. A fourth announcement is due to be made this October, and I would imagine yet again they will come back to either franchise or close and put more jobs at risk. The decimation of the Crown Office network is systematic of a wider set of failures within the Post Office. Government funding for the Post Office has fallen from 410 million back in 2013 to 220 million. Cost cutting has been matched by a lack of strategic thinking as to how the Post Office network may be utilised and even increased. The CWU has, for example, long advocated the use of a post bank, and we believe that could be established to the network. Unlike high street banks, the Post Office is routinely cited as one of the most trusted institutions and a vital part of the social fabric of communities across Britain. Indeed, according to which, some 72% of customers found that the service they received was good or excellent. In the past 3 years or upwards, 1,400 high street banks have closed down, a trend that shows no sign of abating, particularly affected the small businesses, the elderly and the disabled. The problems are so severe that over 1.5 million people are estimated not to have access to a bank account. Establishing a post bank would take advantage of a trust.
You're on time now. If you can just...
We support.
Thank you. Unite.
President Congress, Julie Phipps, Unite, speaking in support of Composite 8. Conference, public services have been underfunded and cut to the bone in the name of austerity, the political choice of this cruel Tory government. Outsourcing of public services to the public sector has grown rapidly with the focus on profit margins instead of providing a quality service to those that need it. And with that, a deterioration in the working conditions of the workers delivering that service. Precarious work, casual labour, bullying and harassment, restructure after restructure, creating insecure employment and fear in the workplace. Only a directly employed public sector workforce can deliver a public sector service, a service that puts the user at the heart of the resource, putting people before profits, delivered by workers in secure, organised employment, real jobs with proper pay, terms and conditions negotiated through sectorial bargaining, career progression, opportunities supported by lifelong learning in the workplace, and just as importantly, it's the public sector that can provide genuine apprenticeships with valid qualifications and real jobs at the end of it. We have seen the consequences of the private sector delivering public sector services in the collapse of Carillion. So let's kick the profit-driven greedy corporations out of our public services, demand and fight for real investment, accept no more cuts to an already depleted public service, and employ public sector workers to deliver an accountable and quality-driven service. We want to see this started by Labour-led councils, and for Labour councils to fight back. Labour has its highest number of English councils in a decade. Unite calls on Labour councils to insource public services and respect and recognise their workforce and unions. We need councils to step up to the plate. The Tories are weak and divided. By insourcing councils will strengthen our movement and strengthen public services. I support.
Thank you. Thank you, Unite. I've heard no speakers against. Are NAHT happy to waive their right to reply? Thank you very much. I move to the vote on composite motion number 8. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Those against, please show. That motion is carried. We turn now then to section 2 of the General Council report, Brexit, and that's from page 28 in your book. I'll now explain how I intend to take the Brexit debate this afternoon. I will take the General Council statement on Brexit, composite motion to Brexit, along with paragraphs 2.1 to 2.6 of the General Council's report. First, I'll call Steve Turner to move the General Council statement on Brexit. Then I'll call paragraphs 2.1 to 2.6, and then the mover, seconder, and supporters of composite motion 2. I will then open up the debate to other speakers. After that, the mover of composite motion 2 and Steve Turner, on behalf of the General Council, will have the right to reply in that order. We'll then vote on the General Council statement and composite motion 2 in that order. Is that clear? Yes. Yeah? We can do this. Right, I call Steve Turner to move the General Council statement on Brexit. Steve. No pressure.
Well, I hope that was clear. I'm not sure it was clear. I'm not sure it's so clear to me. But anyway, no, we'll have a fantastic debate, I'm sure. Look, thanks, Sally. Congress, Steve Turner, Unite, and General Council spokesperson on Europe moves in the General Council statement on Brexit. And can I start by recognising up front the political sensitivities surrounding the whole Brexit debate. And I want to put on record our thanks to all of those colleagues that have assisted us in putting the General Council statement together. It's not been an easy task, but it's one that I think we can all be proud of. And to say that I look forward to a great debate, an honest debate, an open debate, and most importantly, I suppose, a comradely debate. Look, Congress today marks just 200 days for a divided, torn, and indeed a shambolic government to reach an agreement with the European Union on the most important and pressing issue facing us today. Our members, of course, want to secure their jobs and protect skills and investment alongside all of their employment rights, while our families need hope and opportunity to replace the helplessness and often the fear and the despair that's caused by mindless ideological austerity. But with a wasted 2 years since the referendum, we're faced with an internal battle for control of government and ministers, potential leaders even, like Boris Johnson, happy to declare their willingness to fuck business in his drive for personal power. Jacob Rees-Mogg, offshoring his business interests to Ireland to avoid his own Brexit carnage. And Northern Ireland Secretary Karen Bradley, who, despite the central importance of the peace process to any Brexit deal, confesses her own ignorance of the politics and the culture of Northern Ireland. Congress, given all that, it's no surprise that the polls show people no longer trust this joke of a government to achieve anything, let alone a good deal for working people. And of course, while we recognise that 2/3 of Labour voters, 60% of trade unionists voted to remain, that means lots of our members did vote for Brexit. And we have to understand why and find solutions to genuine fears and concerns of those who feel abandoned to their fate in a rapidly changing world and betrayed by a political elite that doesn't speak to or for them. Congress, we live in a divided Britain, however we voted, and it's our job, it's our duty, in the absence of government, to step up, to organise for change and to deliver the programme necessary to heal the wounds and secure the best possible future for working people, our families and our communities outside of the European Union. Because, comrades, that feeling of betrayal is deep-rooted. A betrayal of the Brexit vote without answers will only add to a crisis of belonging and identity that can find its way onto our streets with a rapid and dangerous rise of the far right. So, Congress, we need to act, and we need to act fast. Michael Gove said he'd had enough of experts. It now seems that him and his cabinet of the rich have had enough of exports. Last year, we adopted a General Council statement that set out our tests for a Brexit deal that covered trade and customs, citizens, consumers and environmental rights. We set out our plans for protecting decent jobs, defending workers' rights, ensuring continuing peace in Northern Ireland and, of course, no new restrictions between Gibraltar and Spain. And a year on, nothing the Tories have said or done can give us any confidence that they'll secure a Brexit other than in their own interests that meets those tests. So if Dominic Raab returns from Brussels with no deal, or a deal that's bad for Britain's workers, we must be clear, and Congress, this statement is clear. It demands we rise like lions to the challenges for our class, to the threat of a hard-right Tory attack on working people, as well as all those threats from those bosses, and we'll give them a warning today as well, who think they can use Brexit to shed jobs, to relocate and offshore our work, or to put a match to our one terms and conditions or our rights and protections. It demands MPs reject a disastrous no deal. It demands that we send a defeated, broken government back to the country in a general election. It demands that we extend Article 50 to give an incoming Labour government, the time and opportunity to negotiate a deal for the many, not the few. And conference, if the politicians can't do that, they refuse to step up and take their responsibilities seriously, yes, we demand we go back to the people so that they can vote on the deal on offer. It's our deal. It's our future. It's my kids' future. It's not theirs. And Congress, this is not a call. This is not a call for a second referendum. A place that some too many outside our movement want to push us. But this is a vote on the terms of our departure if Parliament fails us. If Parliament fails us. So Congress, we need a better, fairer Britain. We need to heal the wounds, and only our movement, only this movement is capable of doing that. So I move with pride.
Thank you, Steve. I call on paragraphs 2.1 to 2.6 and composite motion number 2, Brexit. The General Council supports the composite motion. This is moved by Unite, seconded by CWU, supported by TSSA and RCM. I'm going to call the other unions who I'm going to be calling to speak to the front. That's RMT, in this order, PCS, Unison, Equity. Unite, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sally. Conference, Len McCluskey, Unite, moving Composite 2. I think we can all agree that Brexit is the biggest challenge facing our movement today, graphically illustrated by Steve's excellent open contribution. The jobs of our members, their rights at work, the future of our communities depend on getting it right. Like most unions here, Unite campaigned for Britain to remain in the European Union. But that's an argument we lost, including with large members of our own union. My view hasn't changed on balance. Britain would be better in the European Union than out of it. But that's no longer today's argument. We are democrats and we must accept the decision of the people. Otherwise, Bertolt Brecht's famous quote of governments changing the people comes into play. But colleagues, we do face a crisis entirely of the Tory government's making. Rather than negotiate seriously with the EU, it has wasted 2 years arguing with itself. Theresa May trying to appease the unappeasable, trying to split the difference between common sense and economic madness. She's been held hostage by a coalition of imperial nostalgics and free market fanatics whose vision is of a British society of the 1950s allied with the economic dogma of the 1850s. You know, this would all be very funny if we were not being marched to the cliff edge while, like Nero, the cabinet fiddles. For the Prime Minister, it seemed more important to keep Boris Johnson in the cabinet than it did to keep jobs in this country. And look how that's ended. Conference, our priorities are different, as this composite and indeed the General Council's statement makes clear. We insist on a Brexit that keeps and indeed builds on those workers' rights that come from the EU, secures barrier-free trade with Europe, which is the only guarantee for millions of jobs and investment, protects both EU citizens here and British citizens living and working in the EU, and must include securing customs unions with the EU after we leave. But sisters and brothers, we also have to consider the politics of Brexit. As the government's strategy moves towards its moment of contact with reality. Since the Chequers plan is on life support, the danger of a no-deal Brexit looms ever larger. That would be a problem turned into a calamity. Lorry queues at Dover stretching back to the Old Kent Road, medicines running out, aeroplanes unable to land anywhere. Although we're now told that Chris Grayling, of all people, is going to actually negotiate bespoke agreements with all EU 27 countries in order to get landing rights. This from a man who can't organise a train from London to Doncaster without the operator going bankrupt. It's hardly reassuring, colleagues. So if we head towards a no-deal Brexit, it will be time for Parliament to slam the brakes on, and for this divided and reckless government to make way for one which can deliver the proper jobs-first Brexit, which is the only responsible way to honour the 2016 referendum result. The vote, colleagues, that we desperately need above all is a general election that can deliver a Labour government which will not only conduct honest and friendly talks with the EU, but is the only political party with policies that deliver for the whole nation, for the 52% and the 48%, by tackling the underlying economic and social problems that led so many to give the establishment a well-deserved kicking 2 years ago. Colleagues, I understand the argument for a so-called people's vote on the deal, not on leaving the EU. That people's vote has already happened. And I accept that that option must be left on the table, if for no other reason as a safety net, if the Tory MPs become spineless and don't have the courage of their own convictions to oppose what the Prime Minister brings back. But let's focus on the prize, sweeping this government away in a general election and giving Labour under Corbyn the chance to repair 2 wasted years of Tory wrangling and 40 wasted years of neoliberal aggression against our jobs, our services, our rights and our communities. I move.
CWU second.
Yeah, Dave Ward, Communication Workers Union, to second the composite and to support the General Council statement. And Len referred to the fact that this is increasingly going to become a matter of political judgment. Political judgment for the people who we represent means unifying workers everywhere. That is the number one priority, and we're up for all of the things that this statement says. But we are concerned, and I want to set out very clearly where the CW is and where it isn't at the moment. And our view, like Len, like Steve said in the moving of the statement, is that we have got absolutely no reason, as far as we're concerned, to support a second referendum that reruns the debate that divides this country at the moment. That would be the biggest mistake our movement makes if we're serious about bringing about a change of government and representing our members. And we have to work hard in this political climate to make sure that those who seek to divide us, those who only want a choice of the status quo in Europe, and I voted to remain, and our union recommended remain, and I'd do that again, but the status quo is not good enough as far as we're concerned. We also wanted reform of Europe, and we'd like to see Labour going out there at the conference next week and making it clear on what reform of Europe means. And I don't think at this stage it's right for us to suggest that the composite in front of us means that we are now the champions of a people's vote. That may come and that may have its moment. The vote that we're interested in is getting in a people's government, and that means backing Corbyn's Labour 100% when we go to that Labour conference. We have concerns. We have concerns about undercutting of people's wages in this country. That's the reason to reform Europe. We have concerns coming from the postal industry, and postal workers will tell you our members have been shafted by a Labour government at that time, a new Labour government, introducing competition rules in advance of anything that Europe even wanted to do. We ain't going back down that road. That has to change. And we do need intervention. We do need to be able to deliver the manifesto. I'll finish by saying this. The most important things that we can do for workers in this country is to unify those who voted leave with those who voted remain. And the way to do that is to start the fight for a new deal for workers in the UK, not in Brussels. Let's start it now.
Thank you, Dave. TSSA, to be followed by RCM.
President, Congress. There you go. Manuel Cortes, Transport Salaried Staffs Association, supporting the composite. And the reason we are doing this is because the other two speakers, Len and Dave, are absolutely right. The overriding priority of our union, and I'm sure your overriding priority too, is to get rid of this zombie government and get a Labour government in, led by Jeremy Corbyn. A Labour government that is going to be a government for the many. But we cannot rule out the fact that our political class will do all it can to prevent a socialist Labour government coming into being. And these issues around Brexit are far, far too important to be left to politicians. It was the people who gave the mandate for us to leave the EU. It must be the people who decide what the terms of that exit actually means. And if the politicians cannot get the deals that puts jobs first, well, we send them back to renegotiate. But it should be the people who are in control of that. You know, we are all trade unionists. Whenever we negotiate a deal, we go back to our members and we ask them whether or not that deal is good enough. If it's good enough and they vote yes, then it's all well and good. But if they don't, we go back and try and get something that's better. And that's exactly what we're saying
with this. And that's why it's important that it doesn't matter whether you voted Remain or Leave. What really matters is what we are getting in the future. Because the media is now talking about a blind Brexit. It's the equivalent of buying a peg in a poke. We leave the EU and we don't know what we are getting. Who would sign up to that in their right mind? No one. No one. And we as a movement have to come together and put whatever our demands are, and we've got many demands, of what we want to see in the future, and then trust the people to make that decision with us. You know, Rees-Mogg, God bless him, he let the cat out of the bag, isn't it? He was asked, what and when will we see the benefits of Brexit? And what did he say? 50 years from now. 50 years, I'll be 6 foot under, and so will most of you. 50 years. 50 years, for Christ's sake. But you know, when you get somebody like Rees-Mogg, who is 3 centuries behind the rest of us, 50 years probably doesn't sound much, but I tell you, that's our eternity for us, for our families, and for our children. So please support this composite.
Thank you, Manuel. RCM.
John Skews, Royal College of Midwives, supporting the composite. Do you think that when Boris Johnson stood in front of a bus with 350 million more a week for the NHS if we leave the EU, the reality would become drug companies being asked to hold 6 weeks of stocks of drugs and to fly in short shelf life drugs in the run-up to the 31st of March 2019. Notice it's drug companies. The current government like a private sector solution to a problem, don't they? Whatever the cost of that solution is going to be. And it's really interesting that those drug companies are now saying to the government, more responsibly than the government, that they think they need to hold 12 weeks of those drugs. That's worrying to people who work in the NHS. It should be worrying to anybody in this hall, because that's the life of people in this country that they're putting at risk. Did we think at that time that the supply of great NHS staff from other EU countries would be drying up? It effectively has stopped in this country now. The biggest problem in the NHS is the shortage of staff right across that, whether that's nurses, whether it's doctors, whether it's AHPs, or whether it's midwives. That's the problem we need to solve, and it's making it worse. And what's the vision for our NHS? Dr. Fox, not the light entertainer, Dr. Fox, the Trade Secretary, is happy to see a trade deal with Donald Trump and US private healthcare business. It's the alternative to our socialised health service. It's the death of our NHS potentially. Crashing out of the EU with no deal would help that ambition. It would also assist the rise of Boris Johnson, a man for whom his own trouser zip would be a clear and present danger. So pleased that worked. We may see negotiations collapse. We are unlikely to see TUC tests met in any deal. We may see Parliament fail to resolve the terms of Brexit. And if all of that happens, I don't think we will see the Tories move to an election anytime soon. They will change the guard rather than do that. They don't have to be in that election situation. So in those circumstances, in extremis, if everything else fails, then we should have a popular vote. And that's what this motion calls for. I call on you to support the composite. I call on you to support the General Council statement as well. We have to have all of those options on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call on RMT next, to be followed by Unison, to be followed by PCS, to be followed by Equity. I have no other notifications. Just want to check. Thank you. RMT.
Congress, Mick Cash, RMT, asking you to vote down the General Council statement and Composite 2. Congress, we are asking you to vote this down because the statement says that we can remain in the single market. Congress, the single market is the EU. It is the driving force behind the race to the bottom of privatisation and of austerity. It's what the British people, our members, voted to reject in the EU referendum. And Congress, let's be clear, we're also asking you to vote this down because a people's vote, a popular vote, or whatever you want to call it, is a de facto second referendum on the EU. Congress, we need to understand that those in the Westminster bubble are calling for a people's vote for the sole reason of a second referendum on the EU. They are your Chuka-Ramunas, your Chris Leslies, your Peter Mandelsons, your Tony Blairs, Liberal Democrats. That's who we, the movement, will be lining up with if we support another vote. And some might want to do that. These are the people who want us in the EU, so the EU can stop Jeremy Corbyn's plans for nationalisation and for state aid and for workers' rights. We, the trade union movement, will be lining up with people who are seeking to force the hand of Jeremy Corbyn, and with people who want to attack the socialist leadership of the Labour Party and who want to attack socialist policies. Now, I definitely don't put Francis in that camp, but I was concerned when asked on Andrew Marr if a vote on the deal could lead to a vote on rejoining the EU. She said, I would never say never. So let's be honest here. The people's vote, or a popular vote, is nothing more than a Trojan horse to a second EU referendum. A second referendum that would lead to social unrest. And that's not just me saying that, the Labour front bench is saying it. Congress, if I went back to my members who have felt that have already been rejected, I would get unrest as well. The Tories will absolutely love it if we support this statement. It gives them the get-out-of-jail card they are crying for. It lets them off the hook because the issue becomes not what sort of Brexit we want, but whether there should be a second referendum. It lets them off the hook because what they are terrified of is not a people's vote, but a general election. Congress, the only vote that matters is a general election. We should be calling for one thing and one thing only. An urgent general election, a socialist Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell. We don't need a people's vote. We need a national vote that will sweep this rotten Tory government out of power. Thank you.
PCS. Mark? I think you are PCS, last time I noticed. Yeah. Come into my world.
Thank you, Sally. Congress, Mark Sawatka on behalf of PCS to support both the composite motion and the General Council statement, and to say in doing so that I thought the General Council statement was outstandingly moved by Steve Turner, and would ask all delegates to not just read the statement but to listen very carefully to the key points in it. Because from PCS's perspective, the last referendum was one of the most divisive things we have seen in this country for years. We've been told that 60% of our members voted to remain. I voted to remain, but 40% voted to leave. That's nearly 3 million trade unionists. I'm sure you, like me, despair at watching Question Time, seeing working class people in the audience applaud Tories, or sometimes even worse, when they make speeches about leaving the European Union and making sentiments about anti-immigration. From our union's point of view, we do not solve these problems by repeating those divisions. So we believe in supporting the motion. We do so on the very clear points as follows. Firstly, this statement is not a second referendum. If it was, we wouldn't vote for it. It would be a disaster to have a second referendum. The statement makes it clear we are leaving the European Union and we respect the result. But for those people, therefore, who question that we should stand back and leave the Tories do what they want, I ask you this. We may be leaving Europe, but it will be an abrogation of our duties if we let the Tories negotiate a deal that is against working class people, that is anti-immigration, that is pro-business and pro-privatisation. That will be the trade union movement washing its hands of a current situation in the way that we never do. So when we call for a vote, we want, yes, a general election. But as the statement and the composite makes clear, if the Tories cling to power, the purpose of a vote, and let's be clear, is not the people's vote advocated by Chuka-Ramuna. So to be clear, we are not with Chuka-Ramuna, but neither are we with Jacob Rees-Mogg. We are an independent working class movement made up of millions of members, and we can determine our own position. So in any vote, we forget the division. I think we should stop using the language of the bosses of the single market and everything that they talk and bamboozle people with. We should say this: we want to vote for workers' rights, to scrap the trade union laws, anti-austerity, for a strong welfare state, against privatisation, for a private sector to be out of our NHS, and to renationalise rail, the utilities, and all of those services that have been privatised over Labour and Tory governments. And while we're at it, we need resources in the civil service, currently the smallest since the Second World War. Not 6,500 people apparently working on a no-deal Brexit. We want people in job centres paying out benefits to workers. We want people in tax offices collecting the taxes that the rich always seek to avoid. So if we want those things, it must be inconceivable that we let Theresa May negotiate a deal or allow us to leave on a no deal. So our Congress should say this: we stand for the people in our communities. We stand for freedom of movement and welcoming people to this country. But we are against undercutting bosses and the privateers. And we stand for those things, which means this: opposing the Tories' deal, opposing no deal, accepting we're leaving Europe, but demanding a general election. And if the
Mark, I need you.
Our view is this, and I'll finish on this: a people's vote would be a popular vote, not about staying in Europe, but a vote of no confidence in this government that must lead to a general election. Support the statement, stand up for our communities, and get the Tories out.
Thank you. Thank you. It's Unison. Thank you.
President Conference, James Anthony, Unison, supporting the composite and the statement. Getting the joy of following a string of General Secretaries. And I'd like to apologise for being a man, because we need to work on making sure key debates are not all one gender in the debate. Congress, this hall is full of serious negotiators. So we know a shambles when we see one. And Congress, serious negotiators, the Tories ain't. It's like you can see Theresa May stood in a Channel 4 TV studio, Noel Edmonds beside her, the audience shouting for her to go for no deal. But only when the banker calls, Barnier knows she's only got 50p in her remaining box. But Congress, Brexit is not a game. The Brexit chaos that the Tories are presiding over is already causing suffering. And a Tory hard Brexit will send shockwaves down the generations. Tory free market Brexit could be 80s neoliberalism on speed. And that is what we absolutely must stop, Congress. And as we meet in our 150th year, Unison are celebrating our 25th year. 25 years where we've been highly critical of the EU and the EU's neoliberal models and institutions. But back when it mattered in 2016, our assessment was clear that our members and the public services that they provide are better off in the EU. But the people voted, and we cannot simply turn round and tell them, no, you're wrong, try again. That is not our idea of democracy. Unison's efforts have been working with the Labour team to make sure we deliver the best possible protections for workers, our members and public services. Protecting our members in the north of Ireland, whose very peace and lives could be threatened by the Tory shambles. Protecting our 80,000 EU members, and I'm glad to announce that we continue to support the 3 Million campaign, and we'll be supporting their lobby of Parliament on the 16th of October, and I invite you to join us. So whilst a referendum isn't an option, it isn't going to stop austerity. It isn't going to protect education and our NHS. It isn't going to restore dignity to our welfare system and to our immigration system. That Congress needs a general election. That Congress needs a Labour government. That Congress is the people's vote that we call for, and that's why we support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Unison. I call equity.
Stephen Spence, Equity, supporting the General Council's statement on Brexit, which if you go to the end of it says, and that starts with getting the right Brexit deal, one that protects workers' rights and helps create more good jobs. And that's where we're coming from. We have globalized industries. Whether we like it or not, we have globalized industries, and our people have to go to where the work is. The DCMS industries are worth $250 billion to the UK, $92 billion in the creative sector. We've never got access to all that money, and there's people who want to deny us access to it, which is strange. But we go out and we find our access to it. And we need visas for all 27 countries after the deal, not 27 separate visas, because that would be impossible for our people to work. We need no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I'm glad that Karen Bradley has managed to work out Northern Irish politics is different. I mean, I've never been to a job interview where I was asked the question, well, what do you know about our area? I was able to say nothing, but I will learn on the job. But that seems to be what has happened here. So here's something. Game of Thrones, based in Belfast, reported in 2016 having brought £150 million into Northern Ireland's economy. Massive for one production, not counting the tourist spin-off, and there's been more since. It's led to sound stages being built, infrastructure, they've done Line of Duty, The Fall, Krypton, there is a long list. All valuable work opportunities for Northern Ireland, performers who suffered for years with a lack of local opportunities. But those productions have units in Croatia, Spain, other EU locations. At the moment, you can get the visas reasonably easy. With a hard Brexit, you won't. Sound stages are now being built in Limerick. If Brexit visa complications become too hard, that means that those of us with Irish passports will celebrate when the work still is in Ireland. But what will Britain have done for Northern Ireland, which had a majority for Remain? For an ideological idea of a hard Brexit based on a glory fantasy of empire, jobs and economic benefits will be sold down the river, jobs and economic benefits that are a major part of the peace dividend in Northern Ireland. There are a whole number of other things that need to be sorted in a deal. Workers' rights, being with the co-production agreement, the rights of EU citizens and UK citizens in Europe. But for Equity, we are vehemently opposed to a no-deal hard Brexit. It's not a question of taking the country back. When was this country ever fully owned and controlled by its people? It's a question of having the deal in place that ensures when we're engaged by those who do currently own and control it, we can get access to the work, the visas to do the work, see our nations and regions have good work and benefit and build socially and economically, and see the government that's the body that's supposed to do the deal, do their work, get the deal, so we can move on and continue successfully.
I then move to rights to reply. Unite, no. On behalf of the General Council, Steve? No. Thank you, everyone. That means that I'm going to move to the vote. So I'm moving first to the vote on the General Council statement. Will those in favour of the General Council statement on Brexit please show? Thank you. Those against? That's carried. That's overwhelming. Thank you. If I can then move to the vote on motion number 2. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. Again, that's carried overwhelmingly. Thank you. Don't take this thing, please. Don't take them. Okay, delegates, we move to section 4 of the General Council report. That's goods services. That's from page 48 on your books. I call motion 62, preventing ill health. The General Council support the motion. It's moved by the CSP. It's seconded by the BOS. The other speakers I have are Unite and the College of Podiatry. Can I have all those speakers to the front of the hall, please? Thank you. So it's the CSP to move.
President, Congress, Alex Mackenzie, Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, moving motion 62. Prevention is better than cure. It's an old cliche, but it does remain true. Preventing ill health holds the key to improving the life experience of millions of people in Britain today, whilst also reducing the burden on overstretched health and social care services. There is also a benefit to the economy, since employers stand to gain from fewer days lost due to sickness. And yet today, only 4% of the health budget is spent on prevention, and public health budgets have seen cuts in real terms in recent years. So it was with deep disappointment I heard the announcement in June of the additional funds into the NHS for the next 5 years, specifically excluding public health. And it's even more disappointing to see further cuts announced in July to public health programmes to tackle smoking, alcohol abuse and poor diet. This is affecting some of society's most vulnerable and is so short-sighted. According to the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, 80% of obese children remain obese into adulthood, and this means losing 10 to 20 years of healthy life. Physical inactivity is a major part of the problem. In the UK, just 50% of the UK adults do the recommended minimum 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise a week. Physical inactivity is the 4th largest cause of disease and disability and directly causes 1 in 6 deaths in the UK. We are deeply worried as a profession, as a union. That is why the CSP has launched a campaign, Love Activity, Hate Exercise, to raise public awareness of this issue. When we talk about moderate to vigorous exercise, it's not just running, gym sessions or lycra-clad cycling, although if these are your preference, that's great. We're talking about brisk walking, maybe with your dog, or swimming, with or without your kids, kicking a ball around, tennis or swing ball, hula hoops or skipping, hill walking, dancing, or anything that can get you a little out of breath and raise your heart rate slightly. We want people to find an activity that they like and use it to raise their activity levels to achieve the health-improving benefits of exercise. Physiotherapists are in contact with patients every day who do little or no exercise, and we can support people to start small and to build up. So we can make a real difference, and that is why the nation needs to invest in physiotherapy, which, like other NHS staff, we are already massively overstretched. We need at least 500 extra physios a year to keep up with demand in services. But this is not actually about banging the drum for physiotherapy. We know that a single campaign like this and physios alone cannot get the nation moving. We know that the nation will struggle to be more active unless councils reverse the damaging austerity cuts to sports and leisure facilities in recent years. We are aware of some councils having cut their sports budgets by over 1/3 in the past 5 years. And we know that it is critical that there is proper funding for public health and ill health prevention programmes. We need the government to make a commitment to properly fund public health directly and through councils to limit the inactivity health crisis of the future. We are all union activists fighting for a better quality of life for workers across the UK. So let's up our activity on this issue too. I move.
Thank you. Second this, thank you.
President. Congress. Leslie Ann Baxter, British Orthotic Society, supporting motion 62. The issue of physical activity, or lack of it, has been wildly underestimated on its effects in a wide variety of conditions. It impacts on the whole of society and on conditions such as diabetes and obesity, and as such should be at the top of the public health agenda and not as a separate issue. The 4% of public health funding spent on prevention is not enough. In eye health, the area where I work, we know that 2 million people have a visual impairment, and this means that physical activity becomes more difficult. However, we know that those diagnosed with sight loss also have mental health issues, And we know that where rehabilitation officers work in eye clinics and where walking for health groups have trained walkers to help those with sight loss, the percentage of those with comorbidities such as diabetes, mental health issues and obesity are significantly reduced. However, those areas with such good practice are small and often funded as pilot studies or by charities, and the long-term benefits are always overlooked. The training of habilitation or rehabilitation officers is not national and often funded by local or national eye health charities, and so the NHS issues of making every contact count are often not embedded. We need proper public health funding for those important people in the eye healthcare team to raise the awareness of how physical activity can raise the self-esteem of those with sight loss, as well as improve their physical and mental well-being. It is a false economy to campaign for a reduction in a single condition, such as smoking, when we know that an overall strategy of increasing physical activity for everyone, including those with disabilities such as sight impairment, can have an effect. Sight loss is not high on the agenda either, and yet how many people in this Congress hall realise that smoking, obesity, diabetes can cause sudden and irreparable sight loss? We do need to have a properly funded public health agenda, raising these often preventable health issues. As the motion states, a single campaign will not work. What we need is a strategic move within public health to join up these separate issues of conditions such as diabetes, obesity and mental health, and reduce a single number of other health issues. Please support.
Thank you. I've got the College of Podiatry, is that right? Yes, thank you.
President, Congress, Sarah White speaking on behalf of the College of Podiatry, seconding motion 62. It's my first time at Congress speaking today. Congress, the College of Podiatry welcomes the motion from our allied health professional colleagues within the CSP. You will be aware of the multiple health issues that are becoming increasingly prevalent in today's society, and therefore diseases such as diabetes, peripheral arterial disease and mental health conditions all have long-term effects and potential grave consequences upon the public and also the health economy. Evidence demonstrates that exercise and activity can have positive effects upon these conditions. However, Congress, we believe that in order to prevent ill health, the government should properly fund public health initiatives and services that can promote healthy lifestyles. NHS podiatry departments have seen cuts and even closures to musculoskeletal services, meaning that many patients have nowhere to go when seeking specialist input for conditions such as heel pain and Achilles tendinosis. And without specialist input, these conditions have long-term effects, prevent people socialising and exercising and even working. Congress, we are happy to support this motion and back the call for this government to properly finance and budget a preventative healthcare agenda, keeping our nation fit, healthy and working. I second this motion.
Thank you, Sarah. It's good to have your voice as part of Congress. Welcome. Can I call you Knight?
Congress, Alex Wedlake, Unite the Union. First and foremost, I would like to say that, like many others here today, it is my first time here at Congress and speaking. It is with immense pride I stand here today to represent the young members of Wales within my union. I am speaking to support Motion 62. Our movement has been the champion of an energetic and militant campaign in support of our beloved NHS that has suffered year after year of Tory austerity and privatisation. From national demos in London to local campaigns to save NHS services from Leeds to London and many other trusts across the country. And rightly so. Frontline staff are overworked, underpaid and quite frankly underappreciated. We really do need to smash this pay cap. The NHS services provided are second to none, and they are the world's envy. Unfortunately, in its current state, it falls somewhat short of Bevan's vision of a fully funded healthcare system that is free at the point of need. My grandfather relies on local leisure services funded by the council to retain his mobility and independence. Services that, if cut, would only increase in cost once referred to the NHS. What concerns me is the inability of the current system to recognise that by just treating the symptom is just as unsustainable as capitalism itself. There must be a clear preventative strategy in place in order to relieve the burden of ill health. That is why I find it absolutely unthinkable that local councils continue to implement cut after cut to local services that are the lifeline to so many communities in both physical and mental health. In Caerphilly, one local leisure centre has been saved from closure, not once, but twice already. Yet the council are insistent on removing these services that are vital to a healthy and active society. It is important that our movement remains at the forefront of protecting such services. It would be a discredit to our movement to pretend these cuts to services are simply a result of Tory austerity. We must fight all cuts, whether they are Tory cuts or whether it is showing and persuading a Labour council that there is another way and that the rainy day has arrived. We must demand our councils to stand courageous, to use reserves available to refuse to cut services, not only to cut jobs and to embark on a mass council home building scheme. That is how we defeat the Tories. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. Please support the motion.
Alexander, thank you. And again, great to have you speaking as part of this debate. Do I have a right of reply? No, thank you. So I'm going to move straight to the vote. Those in favour of motion 62, please show. Thank you. Those against, please show. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Congress, as I warned you earlier, I am about now to be a bit brutal on speakers because we've fallen a good chunk of time behind and we are going to lose some motions later on this afternoon if I don't do this. So on composite motion 12, which I am now calling, I'm going to call Unison to move, seconded by the Society of Radiographers, supported by USDOR, CWU, Equity and TSSA. I am not going to call any other speakers on this debate because we simply don't have the time if we're going to make sure that all other unions who have put motions on the floor for this afternoon get their opportunity. So there are speakers out there I know who have made preparations and I apologise, but this is the only way that I can make sure that this is what we do to keep everybody able to have their policies debated. With that, can I move composite motion 5 now? The General Council support the composite motion. Unison, I ask you to move the motion. Thank you very much. Can I have all those unions that I've called to the front? Society of Radiographers, USDOR, CWU, Equity and TSSA. Unison.
Congress President Nikki Ramanandi moving the composite on mental health on behalf of Unison. Congress, we've all seen the impact that austerity has had. We've seen the damage it has done to our economy, the pain it has caused for the vulnerable and the sheer havoc it has wreaked in public services. Union members continue to pay the price of government incompetence. We've had 10 years of austerity. The Tory agenda of decimating public services and cutting benefits to the most vulnerable shows that it is clear that this agenda is producing a mental health crisis that has led to both an increase in mental health across the population and to major problems for the delivery of vital services. And as we pointed out in our motion, it should come as no surprise that polling across the UK shows a doubling in concern about mental health. Mental health has for far too long been a Cinderella service, something that was always underfunded, a service that was always the first to be cut. There has been much talk of a parity of esteem, an attempt to put mental health on a par with physical health. The facts paint a very different picture. 1 in 4 adults in the UK will experience mental health problems. Unison members tell us that the pressures at home and at work and the impact this has had on them, pressures brought about because of austerity, has had real impact on them. Workplace reps have reported with concern the huge rise of casework regarding supporting members with mental health issues. Members frightened to be absent from work due to the harsh sickness policies that employers have. Indeed, what they've told us is that many organisations pride themselves on their commitment to promoting a diverse workforce, yet we know that many members are dismissed simply because they're unable to maintain a good attendance level. what is a good attendance level. The number of mental health beds has fallen by as much as 30% in some parts of the UK. There has been a drop in the number of mental health nurses and in the number of doctors specialising in this area. Mothers and children have particularly lost out. Thousands of women in England are having to cope alone with mental health problems caused by pregnancy and giving birth. And there is an acknowledgement that there are absolutely excellent services out there, but these are not enough and these are not consistent, and many women are left alone to simply deal with their issues. Children and young people with serious mental health problems are receiving treatment as far as 285 miles away from their home due to severe bed shortages. 70% of children who experience mental health problems have not had the appropriate intervention. Due to pressures within the NHS, waiting lists continue to grow, so hundreds of children are waiting more than a year for specialist mental health support. Clearly, if you can afford to pay, it is a very, very different story, yet another example of the growing inequality within our society. And it is not just those receiving services who have felt the impact of the cuts. Recent Unison member surveys have shown the toll that the cuts and growing pressures have had on those providing mental health services. Solutions are there, but the government and policymakers need to take them seriously. We need a substantial increase in mental health funding, alongside a commitment that the budgets cannot be raided to try and address the problems that cuts elsewhere have created. But more than this, we need a mental health approach that is in a holistic way, an approach that stretches beyond the NHS to encompass local government, education and the police sectors, and thus must be part of the ongoing discussions regarding the remodelling of social care. That is why it's very dispiriting that the government in England has continually failed to address social care properly. The Green Paper still hasn't materialised, and when it does, there must be serious concerns that a deeply divided Tory party would ever be able to provide the answers that are so badly required. And as Unison made clear in our motion, mental health must be seen as a workplace issue, not a standalone issue, but one integral to our collective bargaining. Changes are required to ensure that work-related stress absence is reportable. Congress, unions have rightly been at the forefront of campaigns against austerity. We've led the fight for our NHS. We continue to battle against insecure work. Now we must come together and help end the crisis within mental health. Thank you. I move.
Thank you very much, Unison. Society of Radiographers, thank you. To be followed by Astor and the CWU.
President, Congress, Gareth Thomas, Society of Radiographers. This year, I, amongst many other healthcare professionals, celebrated the 70th anniversary of the creation of the National Health Service. As other health professionals, we know too well that a holistic approach to patient care is fundamental to ensure parity between a person's mental and physical well-being. The systematic underfunding of mental health services continue. Funding for NHS Trust, providing mental health services, has fallen by more than 8% in real terms since 2010. Systematic cuts have now created a situation where there's enormous demand with little capacity to meet the need. In 5 years, up to 2016, mental health trusts in England have had £600 million slashed from their budgets. Meanwhile, the number of seeking mental health community has helped jump to 1.7 million since 2010. 73 local areas have seen their GP mental health budgets slashed in 2016 to 2017. Haringey, one of the poorest boroughs in London, has had 16% cuts to its budget. Patients in crisis are forced to attend A&E departments due to a lack of resources. Between 2011 and 12, 2015 to 2016, patients attending A&E units with psychiatric problems rose by 50% to 165,000. In 2012, we were delivered the Health and Social Care Act, including requirement for both the NHS to have equal regard for both mental and physical health at every level of the system. This government is long on rhetoric, but short on providing adequate funding for resources. The crisis in mental health provision is getting worse. This government must act now. I urge conference to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm calling CWU, is that right? that right?
President Congress, Fiona Curtis from the CWU. Did you know that 1 in 4 people are affected by mental health? To give you an idea, that's roughly 3 people in every row here today. Recent government's figures show that employers lose up to £42 billion each year due to staff suffering from mental health problems. Poor mental health is reported to cost the UK economy £99 billion each year. Clearly this calls for urgent action, but the government is failing to make the necessary funding commitments. Mental health trusts received £105 million less in real terms last year than they did when the Conservatives came into power. I am from Northern Ireland, where mental health is an even bigger issue. Since 2014, in the UK, suicide rates alone have increased 3.8%, whereas in Northern Ireland, during the same time, it has increased 18.5%, and the funding provided is 25% less than the rest of the UK. Young people are increasingly at risk of suffering from mental health due to the challenges they face from pressures on social media and online bullying, to the difficulties of finding decent housing and a secure job with a living wage. 75% of adult mental health problems start before the age of 18, so early intervention makes a lifelong difference. But as the motion says, the government's proposals to transform mental health care for young people will take too long and doesn't go far enough. It's not just the government who aren't doing enough. Many employers are still ignoring the problem, and others are only just beginning to take action. Unions are doing some great work to tackle mental health, but often we're doing it in isolation. In Royal Mail, they have just won an award for their mental health policies, but this is due to a strong union driving this. We can be more effective when we work together. That's why the CWU are calling for a one-day conference in 2019 on mental health in the workplace, to bring together unions and organisations specialising in mental health issues, and for Congress to set up a cross-union working group on mental health, to share best practice and coordinate campaigning work. This is an issue which could affect any one of us.
Very much. You. So it's Asdor now, yes? I've kept you waiting, I'm sorry about that.
President Congress, Amy Murphy, Asdor, speaking in support of the composite motion on mental health. Congress, there's no denying that there's a mental health crisis in the UK. 1 in 3 people are now expected to experience mental health issues during their life. As part of addressing this mental health crisis, we must look at the impact dramatic changes in the labour market are having on working people. The TUC estimate 3.2 million people are employed in insecure work in the UK. Low pay, short hours contracts, and the rise in insecure work have left working people under increased pressure to make ends meet. There is an endemic low pay problem in the UK, and the national living wage is in danger of being completely undermined, as it's simply not high enough to live on. Low-pay workers in sectors like retail are struggling to afford the most basic costs of living: food, energy bills, rent and mortgage repayments. Growing numbers of workers are regularly working above their contracted hours, with no guarantees over these additional hours and the fear that shifts may be taken off them at a moment's notice. At the same time, government cuts to in-work benefits have reduced support for working people, make it even harder to make ends meet. Workers are being forced into a cycle of debt and repayment, relying on loans and borrowing to cover essential bills. Financial stress is a well-known trigger for mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Insecure working practices are not only exacerbating existing mental health problems, but causing new ones. A recent Ulster survey revealed the damaging impact of low-paid, insecure work. 2/3 of workers reported financial worries are having an impact on their mental health. The government's Thriving at Work report estimated poor employee mental health costs the UK employers upwards of £33 billion a year. Congress, challenging low pay and improving employment protection is vital to addressing the mental health crisis in the UK. We need urgent action from the government and employers. Better pay, guaranteed hours and job security will go some way towards relieving the pressures on low-paid workers. Congress, please support the composite on mental health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call equity. Thank you. And then have I got TSSA ready? Thank you.
Congress, I'm Bertie Carville, speaking in support of the motion. I'm from Equity. I'm proud and moved and I admit a little nervous to be here on this great occasion for the first time, speaking for the first time. And listen, so there's a mounting concern across the creative sector that we're facing a mental health crisis following a recent surge in suicides. I've come prepared with a speech full of shocking statistics and persuasive arguments, but I'd like to take a moment, first of all, just to talk from the heart about my experience of working in our sector. If you want a good laugh, go onto YouTube on your tablets and phones and look for a short film called Fiery Hawk. Most actors I know have seen this. It's one of my favorite things on the internet, and it's hilarious. It brilliantly satirizes the casual humiliations that actors face on a regular basis when they go into the casting process, the attack on our self-respect and dignity. Like all good satire, it's breathtakingly true to life. The nature of our work means that Equity members are objectified and commodified as a matter of course. As a professional actor, you get used to people telling you you're just not what we're looking for. And that's fair enough. It's a competitive world. It's a buyer's market. If you can't stand the heat, get out the kitchen. Well, there is an impact. Confidence and self-esteem are the rocket fuel that propels a few into the stratosphere, but leaves other people depleted and vulnerable, crashing down to earth and sometimes lost at sea. If you add to this mix the precariousness and insecurity of the jobs that you do get, and the low, sometimes no pay that our members enjoy as a reward, you start to see the backdrop to some of the tragic statistics I mentioned earlier. Here's a couple of them. The Office for National Statistics found that people working in culture, media and sport occupations are at a 20% increased risk of suicide. The risk is further elevated for women in those occupations. In fact, the risk for them is 69% higher than the national average. A quarter of our members report that mental health has impacted their career to a greater or lesser extent. And here's the thing, at the moment, too many people can't access funded support and are finding they're forced into paying for help. For our part, alongside other industry bodies, we've created the Arts Minds campaign. artsminds.co.uk, there's a wealth of resources there. But we need to look beyond these first lines of support. Employers must recognise and act on their responsibilities for safeguarding mental health and well-being. Workplace stress and mental health must be treated in the same way as other health and safety obligations, by assessing risks that are likely to become triggers and taking preemptive action to control those risks. Conference, I urge you to support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. TSSA.
Kieran Crowe, speaking in support of the composite motion for Transport Salary Staff Association. I think in a year when people are thinking a lot about the history of the movement, I think it's worth recalling that health and safety has always been absolutely central to the aims and values of the trade unions, and one of the greatest sort of gifts of the trade union movement, really to society as a whole, has been securing the rights of people at work to have basic health and safety, and not for any job to have to put yourself into danger, to sacrifice your precious health. And I think what this motion as compromise does really well is emphasise that threats and risks to your mental health are every bit as unacceptable as threats to your physical health. The motion as compromise is calling for proper risk assessments into the impact that jobs are having on people at work, and we should no more expect workers to to survive, to get a wage, to go into an environment that's harming their mental health, than we would let them go and work at height or with heavy objects without protections to make sure that they're safe and that they're and that they're going to go home at the end of the day and they're going to be okay. So I urge you to vote for this motion. But more importantly, let's put into practice the very good points that that this compromise motion makes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, TSSA. I am now going to move us to the vote on composite motion 12. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That is carried. Thank you very much. Congress, I now am very pleased to introduce Andy Kerr, who joins us as this year's fraternal speaker from the Labour Party. I think he's going to deserve a round of applause for this. He's the chair of the Labour NEC. That's no walk in the park, I'd like to suggest at this point in time. But he's been a member of the NEC since 2007. In keeping with this year's international theme, Andy is a member of the Telecom Committee of the Union Network International and a member of the EU Social Dialogue Committee for the telecom sector. Andy, you are very welcome, and I invite you to address Congress. Thank you.
President, Congress, you've given me a great honour allowing me to address you as chair of the Labour Party NEC, bringing fraternal greetings from the Labour Party to this year's TUC Congress, especially as it's your 150th anniversary. The Labour Party, as you may know, was formed as a result put forward by Thomas Steeles, a Doncaster member of the Amalgamated Society of Railway Servants in 1899. Calling the TUC to hold a special conference to form a single body to sponsor parliamentary candidates. This was adopted by the TUC and it took place in 1990. We were formed, the Labour Party, we were formed to represent the interests and needs of the working class. We were and still are the political voice of the trade union movement. That premise is as relevant today as it was then, and for me, the two organisations are inextricably linked. I've been a trade unionist all my working life, over 40 years, and I've also been a member of the Labour Party for 40 years. I'm extremely proud to be a member of the CWU, and I would like to thank my union for their support and allowing me to have the privilege to become the chair of the Labour Party NEC. And I would also like to place on record my thanks to all the other Labour Party affiliated unions for their support just over the years, but especially this year. I've attended many TUC conferences over the years, and it's not all been a pleasant experience. By that I mean we would debate policy positions, knowing sorry, you should use somebody else's teeth, I think. I find well that neither the Labour Party or indeed the Labour government would adopt or implement what we in the trade union movement were demanding. And using the words of the Flower of Scotland, those days are gone now, and in the past, those must remain. We now have a Labour Party led by Jeremy Corbyn, ably supported by John McDonnell and Rebecca Long-Bailey, amongst others, who will stand on the side of the workers and the working class of this country, who are willing to work in partnership with the TUC and are proud to stand alongside unions and workers in struggle. Just look at our 2017 manifesto, the most radical manifesto in many decades. In the past, we have been told that the people would not support us with these policies, but they did. They did support us. Yes, we didn't win, but our share of the vote massively increased, and we came very close. The message was clear, for the many and not the few. And it did strike a chord with the electorate, especially our young people. Had that campaign lasted only another couple of weeks, I am positive we would have won. The working class of this country wants change. They have had enough of the rich getting richer while they struggle to make ends meet. Low pay is causing misery and hardship for millions of people. Over 8 million people in working households live in poverty, with the government's own latest figure showing 4.1 million children in poverty. Trade unions are essential in tackling insecure work and low pay. Yet the Tories introduced the Trade Union Act 2016, the biggest crackdown in 30 years on trade unions and those workers who benefit from them. According to the TUC, up to 580,000 workers are being paid below the national minimum wage. Agency workers are more often than not denied the same right as employees, and each agency itself works to different standards, and that adds extra complications to law enforcement and promotion of workers' rights. And around 900,000 workers are currently on zero-hour contracts, including 1 in 12 young people. These are some of the reasons that we made commitments in our manifesto, such as that Labour will transform the economy and bring about workplace rights revolution, introducing new trade union and workers' rights and ensuring they're enforced through a Ministry of Labour. They will crack down on exploitative work practices and make tackling poverty the priority it should be, ending zero-hour contracts, introducing a minimum wage of at least £10 per hour, giving a pay rise to over 5.5 million workers. The next Labour government will bring in a plan for security and equality at work, and I have no doubt John McDonnell will cover this in his address to Congress tomorrow. However, I would like to highlight just a few points. We will repeal the Trade Union Act and roll out sectorial collective bargaining, because the most effective way to maintain good rights at work is collectively through a union. We will guarantee trade unions a right to access workplaces so that unions can speak to members and potential members. And we will give all workers equal rights from day one, whether part-time, full-time, temporary or permanent, so that working conditions are not driven down. We will also ban zero-hour contracts, as I said, so that every worker gets a guaranteed number of hours a week. We will abolish the loophole in the agency workers' regulations known as the Swedish derogation. Labour will also legislate to permit secure online and workplace balloting for industrial action votes and internal union elections. These are just a few of our commitments. In Congress, you have a great opportunity to shape and form many, many more. This morning, my own General Secretary made a speech to this conference, Dave Ward, in which he called for a new deal for workers. He called for a manifesto to be drawn up by the TUC. And I would say to you, Congress, this is your opportunity. I would ask you to grasp that. Put forward a manifesto, because you're now pushing an open door with the Labour Party delivering for workers. This is the best opportunity this Congress has had for many, many years, and I would ask you to take that up. The Labour Party will deliver for the trade union movement, and we will encourage people to join trade unions. We will do everything we can to ensure that's the case. And in return, I would ask that you encourage your members to join the Labour Party. We are the largest political party in Europe, with well over 500,000 members. But let me tell you, there's not a full-up sign hanging in the window of our headquarters. We want your members to also be our members. We want them to be involved in forming policies, not only at a national level, but just as importantly, very much at a local level. By working together, we can have a Labour government. We can transform not just our workplaces, but society as a whole. We owe it not only to those who came before us, like Sally outlined yesterday, but we also owe it to our children and our grandchildren. It has indeed been an honour and a privilege to address you today. And I wish you all the very best in your endeavours for the rest of Congress. Thank you very much.
Andy, thank you. You wait there. I wanted, if you would wait there, because on behalf of Congress, we want to give you one of our great honours. It's the Gold Badge of Congress. Congress, would you stand? Thank you, Congress. We continue with section 4 of the General Council report, Good Services, the section on education, from page 52. I call paragraphs 4.6, 3.15 and composite motion number 9, education funding crisis. The General Council supports the composite motion. It's to be moved by the NEU, seconded by the NAHT, supported by UCU. NEU, can I call you to speak, please? Thank you.
President, Congress, Kevin Courtney, Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. Very pleased to be moving this composite motion and being supported by National Association of Head Teachers, University and Colleges Union. There is much to discuss about the education of our young people, much that is problematic and some hope in the National Education Service. But I think it's right, given the scale of the funding crisis in our schools and colleges, the implications that's having for our young people and the implications for the support staff, the lecturers and the teachers, that we start this section on education with this motion titled Education Funding Crisis. But Congress, you would be forgiven for asking whether there is a crisis. Last week, Amanda Spielman, the Chief Inspector, the head of Ofsted, spoke to the Today programme and said that she had no evidence that funding cuts were impacting on the quality of education in our schools. Really, I profoundly disagree with Amanda Spielman, and I invite you to profoundly disagree with her as well. I don't know what the inspectors are up to in schools, but why do they not see what we see? That the number of children, infant children in classes over 30 has doubled since 2011. That we're now in a position where 12% of secondary school children are in classes over 30, where last year there were 66,000 more school-aged children and 5,000 less teachers to teach them. Why don't they see that there are 2,000 children with special needs out of any sort of education and many, many thousands of children with special needs who are suffering because of the cutbacks? Ofsted can't see it. But 64% of NEU members responding to a survey, secondary school teachers, said their schools had already cut back the curriculum on the arts subjects, the subjects that aren't in the EBAC. 70% of our members tell us that schools have already cut back on textbooks and exercise books. There are many parents groups around this country who are now telling us that they're being asked to raise money, not for computers, but for pens and paper. Now, these cuts are all dramatically affecting our schools. NAHT survey recently, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder on this, but 3/4 of head teachers expect that their school will go into deficit this year. 2/3 of those head teachers say these cuts have already impacted on the quality of education. I tell you, our children, our schools deserve an inspectorate that will speak truth to power. Ofsted should be addressing the government and saying these cuts are damaging our children, that cutting back the curriculum, that increasing class sizes, that cutting special needs damages our children's future and damages our country's future. But it doesn't look like we've got an inspectorate that will do that, so it falls to us, to our trades unions, to our members and to parents to speak out on this. And you can see that the government is worried about that as well. You've already heard that 2 weeks ago, they started making noises that teachers and head teachers should be careful about being too political. A few months ago, Tory backbenchers raised concerns about my union's spending in the general election. We are not Labour affiliated. So we've spent money on campaigns, and in the run-up to the general election 2017, we spent £300,000 promoting the joint union website, the School Cuts website. We spent more than UKIP. And I tell you, that was money well spent, because 750,000 people changed their vote because Labour's offer on school funding was so much better than the Conservatives, and we told the truth about it. The government is worried. They don't want us speaking out. But I tell you, it would be wrong for a head teacher not to write to parents to say that they're cutting back on the curriculum because of funding cuts. That would be the political act, to deny parents of the information. If a head teacher has to increase class sizes, if they have to cut back on special needs support, they must tell parents that that's happening, and they must say it's because their budget is being cut. So Congress, I say to you, we have to unite behind head teachers, support staff and teachers in speaking out and telling the truth about the funding crisis facing our schools. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you very much, NEU. NAHT?
Good afternoon, President, Congress. Andy Mellor, President, NAHT, first-time delegate, first-time speaker, and proud to second Composite 9. Colleagues, school budgets are at breaking point. Government data shows that £2.8 billion has been cut from school budgets. That's equal to £45,000 for each primary school and £185,200 for each secondary school. Analysis by the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies shows that between 2009-10 and 2017-18, total school spending per pupil in England fell by about 8% in real terms. In a survey of our school leaders, more than a fifth, 21%, said that their budget for 2017-18 was in deficit, a 13 percentage point increase since 2015. And yet the government as a whole, and the Treasury in particular, are in denial. The silence is deafening. All they have is a worn-out phrase, which isn't true, that schools have never had more investment. I've challenged ministers about this recently, and I'm not frightened as a practicing head teacher to stand up and tell them exactly what the truth is. Come and visit my school. Come and have a look at my budget. Their helicopter view of the system clearly blinds them to the troubles on the ground. More than 4/5, 86% of schools have reduced the hours or numbers of teaching assistants just to make their 2017-18 budgets balance. This figure was 49% in 2015. More than a third, 37%, have had to reduce the number or hours of teaching staff. Almost 3/4, 71%, are expecting to have to set deficit budgets in the next financial year. And almost 4/5, 79%, are expecting a deficit budget for the following year, 19-20. Almost 2/3 of respondents said that they strongly agreed that the reductions that they've had to make has resulted in a negative impact on the performance of the school. This means larger class sizes, less attention for pupils, fewer subject choices, and a threat to the quality of education in every school. We would like more honesty from the government about how much they're spending on schools and young people. At the moment, they're claiming funding is going up, but they're actually making cuts. We wrote to the Chancellor in March asking him for a meeting to talk about the money that schools need. He hasn't yet replied. We'd like him to meet us. Is that really too much to ask? There's a budget coming up in November. We'd like the government to use that moment to announce more money for schools. Colleagues, I urge you to support this motion.
Thank you very much. UC.
President, Congress, Nita Sangera, UCU. I work in a further education college, and I too would say to Amanda Spiemel, come and visit us, and I will show you The amount of cuts that we've had to face in the last few years is astronomical. 24,000 posts have gone in the last 5 years alone in FE. Again, budgets are being cut left, right and centre. In 1 year, we had a 24% cut to funding. These Tory individuals do not understand or do not note what an FE college stands for. Let me tell you what an FE college stands for. It stands for the centre of the community that it serves, generally in very, very deprived areas where we are seen as somewhere that people can aspire to. Go for education for the sake of education, not for the markets that have been set out by this government. You cannot put education on a market, like any public service, like the NHS, like social services. You cannot put a price on that. And I would say to them over and over again, come and see what's in our colleges. Apprenticeships, that is the only time you hear this government talk about an FE college. Apprenticeships, Mickey Mouse apprenticeships, they mean nothing. And as comrades have said before me, there is no job. There is no trade to be had. Gone are the days of the real apprenticeships when you worked and you studied and you had a job at the end of it. No more. It doesn't happen anymore. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we have a ballot open for strike action in FE. Also in HE, together, and I think I don't need to tell you the success that our higher education had in their 14 days of strike action. And what happened during that strike action? 16,000 new members joined. They joined because they wanted to strike. They joined because they knew strike action works. And I would say to all of you here, my brother and sister unions, this is what you need to go back and do. We can sit and talk here till we're blue in the face. Action is what makes moves. Action is what makes governments sit up and listen to us. So I say to all of you, join us. We're an academic union. For goodness sake, we don't strike. Academics have never done this before. And what has happened in return? They listened. So please go back, mobilise action for strike and, of course, a general election. Thank you.
Can I call the IS? Thank you.
President, Congress, Mick Dolan, EIS, Educational Institute of Scotland. A key element of funding in education is to provide a fair pay structure which retains teachers in the classroom and attracts the high quality of graduates that our children deserve as their teachers. We are currently campaigning for a restorative pay claim passed at our conference over a year ago. Over the last 10 years, RPI has risen by 31.7%. Over the same period, the value of teachers' pay in Scotland has fallen behind RPI by 22%, all part of the underfunding of the public sector. This is made even worse when we take into account the increases in the pension contributions and national insurance contributions, which results in a total fall in value of take-home pay of 25.4%. During this same period of a fall in the value of our pay, our workload continues to grow, with ever-increasing stress and pressure on teachers. After internal discussions, we agreed to have a pay claim for the year of 10% for all of our teachers. This is the first step in that restorative pay claim. At tripartite discussions between representatives of government, local authorities and trade unions last week, an offer was tabled which falls way short of the 10% claim. It was agreed to keep the detail confidential until unions had the chance to take it back to their various groups for discussion and response. Yesterday, we saw selective elements of the offer spread across one of our national newspapers. A leak designed to attempt to divide opinion among our members Well, we've got a message for those who leaked the distorted version of the information. Our members are not going to be deflected. This leaking of information is a deliberate attempt by our employers to seek to undermine our union structures and damage the collective bargaining machinery. And to our indiscreet partners in the discussions, the EIS remain committed to negotiations to reach a settlement, but we are prepared to consider all options if this fails. Governments north and south of the border are keen to trumpet their support for education. Our message is simple. If you value education, value teachers. Please support the motion.
Thank you, EIS. NEU, you're right to reply. You okay with that? Thank you, Kevin. I move us to the vote then on composite motion number 9. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. All those against, please show. That's carried unanimously, thank you. I call motion 53, mental health and well-being of teachers. The General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by the NASUWT, seconded by GMB, and we have a supporter of NEU indicated. Is that right? Yes? Okay. Can I have everyone down? I'm again going to be making decisions on the next composites as I go along, announcing about extra speakers. So will you listen out as I go along? NAS, the floor is yours.
Come on. President, Congress. Dan McCarthy, NSWT, the Teachers Union. Moving motion 53 on the mental health and well-being of teachers. I am a teacher. I love being a teacher. But Congress, there is a mental health and well-being catastrophe in our schools that is causing an endemic epidemic of pain. Mental ill health is the single biggest reason for teacher absence. The 2018 annual Big Question survey showed 60% of teachers admit the job was affecting their mental health, an increase of 9% on the previous year. 78% admit to more workplace stress in the last year. 86% to excessive workload stress. Stress and excessive workload are causing a poisonous, toxic environment. And the result? Increasing numbers, especially primary teachers, considering completing suicide. 48% of teachers have been forced to their GP, 30% taking prescriptions to get through the day. 3% of teachers confess to self-harming. Now, recent evidence shows that teens are self-harming in increasing numbers, and the people charged with preventing that are self-harming. Self-harm is a secret condition. Sufferers often do not admit it to themselves, but 3% of teachers are willing to come out and say, my job makes me deliberately cut or injure myself in order to get through the day. Now, the government say they take mental health seriously, that they address teachers' concerns, that they recognise the impact their policies have had. But they show this recognition by introducing new policies. Damien Hines says he understands, but has done nothing. The new EBAC, the new GCSE are a case in point. Both cause high levels of suffering and ill health in children with an inappropriate curriculum designed through normative referencing for 1/3 of children to fail each year, and almost deliberately designed to punish the SEND children by excluding the less able and fostering stress, ill health and fear of failure. And at the same time, Congress, there is a loss of support in schools. There are fewer educational psychologists, fewer non-teaching supporters of children. It is left to our members to console these children on a daily basis and then, in private, break down themselves. Congress, unions are in many cases the only support structures left for teachers. The NSWT has been supporting teachers with the rollout of the mental health first aid programme and working with our fantastic volunteer caseworkers to provide the needed support. The NSWT has been campaigning school by school against adverse working practice where schools treat teachers as a disposable number in a business spreadsheet rather than as human beings or professionals. The NSWT has been lobbying the government using our unique evidence to show how massive the problem is and what it could be overcome and to seek action. Today, Congress, on World Suicide Prevention Day, we must do more to campaign together on mental health. We must provide hope for teachers, show solidarity with our teachers, recognise that teachers, as with all public servants, must be treated with dignity and respect, supported in their work and allowed to have time for their families and friends. Success as an educator should not be the survival of the fittest and those the mentally strong. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you very much. GMB? Do I have the NEU speaker here? I'm just checking. Brilliant. Thank you.
President, Congress, Barbara Plant, proudly seconding this motion on behalf of GMB. I speak as someone who is a teaching assistant, has represented school support staff as a rep over many years, and also in my new capacity as GMB's elected president. I would like to thank the NASUWT for accepting our amendment to this motion, which means the very important message of supporting teachers' mental health and well-being is extended to all who work in schools. GMB represents school support staff whose terms, conditions and working environment has deteriorated. Since 2010, government austerity and the fragmentation of education through academies and free schools have demoralised the workforce. We keep on hearing from the Tories that school funding isn't being cut and that schools are being protected. You already know that is not true. GMB's research has shown that last year, 6,000 school staff lost their jobs, with almost half of them in teaching assistant roles. As well as being devastating for those individuals who lose their job, the damage to remaining staff cannot be dismissed either. Often people are going up against their colleagues and their friends just to stay employed. The mixed feelings of relief and guilt, if successful, must not be underestimated. And we know as well that the workload doesn't get reduced with fewer the staff numbers, it gets much worse. The cuts make our jobs as school support staff twice as hard. On top of that, half of our members working in schools have experienced violence. 1 in 6 say they experience violence every single week. The impact of being hurt at work can stay with you for many years. Employers need to work with us to address this instead of brushing it under the carpet. But unfortunately, education is sadly behaving like a marketplace, and schools don't want anything that might damage their reputation. Our members' pay has been squeezed, our resources have been slashed, and as a result, our work within the school team is made more difficult. Children with the most complicated needs or issues at home lose out as we have fewer colleagues and less time to help pupils. Tory ministers have started talking about how seriously they take mental health, yet it is their policies which have created so many of the problems. The whole of society loses out from the increasing levels of stress and anxiety facing those who work in our schools. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you very much, GMB. Can I call NEU? Thank you. And congratulations on becoming the new GMB president. NEU, thank you.
Congress, President, thank you very much. I'm Mandy Hudson from the National Education Union, and we're very pleased to be able to support this motion from the NASWT around the mental health and well-being of teachers. I think every educator would be able to recognise the 3 dotty points there in terms of the state of the mental health of people involved in education at all levels, really. right through from reception right up to university level. It's probably the case. And this is, as the speakers have already said so much about the effects of government and government policy in terms of the mental well-being of teachers and pupils. The Composite 12 talked about the need to make sure that the stress absences were noted as part of the health and safety legislation a lot more. I'm particularly interested in talking to point C about how the TUC can promote and enhance workers' rights. And I think it's worth remembering that the Equality Act, it's a legal requirement for the Equality Act to make reasonable adjustments for workers, and that includes workers with mental health conditions. There should not be unlawful discrimination taking place, and yet there is. There is a duty to promote equality, to promote the equal participation of disabled people and those, including those with mental health conditions, and yet that's clearly not the case. Too often, if a person acquires a mental health condition during the course of their working life as an educator, the route is just to put them out of work, really, to take them away. Whereas I believe that people with mental health conditions can work very easily in education, but we all need support in that position as well. And I think it's well worth remembering that we have a right to a 48-hour week, and yet NEU surveys show that teachers are often working 55 to 60-hour weeks. So where's the work-life balance in that? So I would recommend this motion to you. I'd recommend the NEU's mental health charter as well, and I do believe that we can have a holistic workplace for our educators where we can all flourish. Thank you very much.
Mandy. NAS, do you need to have your right to reply? You need to write, no? No, he's gone. In that case, I'm going to call the vote on motion 53. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thanks, Mandy. That is carried. Thank you very much. I call composite motion 10, National Education Service. The General Council supports this motion. Moved by the NEU, seconded by the UCU, supported by Unison. I have no other indications, and I'll call no other speakers. So NEU to move. Can UCU and Unison be ready, please? Thank you.
President, Congress, Kim Knappett, proud to be proposing Composite 10, National Education Service, on behalf of the NEU. The facts are simple. Our education system is in crisis, and education professionals, learners, and society are missing out. And that means everyone, every one of us here, everyone out there is affected. Education should be the foundation that every person can build their life on. And this means that we need a national education service which is accessible to all, free to all, when and where they need it or want to access it. In the NEU, we have members in all areas of education, from nurseries to universities, from tiny village primary schools to massive academy chains, in post-16 establishments and colleges, and even working in prisons. Our members fulfil all sorts of roles, from trainees to teachers, lecturers, leaders and managers, support staff and other education professionals. All of these should be part of one national education service. You have already heard from our Joint General Secretary and others about the effects of the current funding crisis, so I will not dwell on them here. But our message to the government is a simple one. You can't get a world-class education system on the cheap. It must be fully funded. Neither can you improve things by tinkering around the edges, changing one thing here and another over there, without looking at the effects that they have on each other. The recent changes to the GCSEs don't get me started. We have a school system that has been systematically fragmented and marketised, especially since 2010. This has led to a culture of competition, competition for pupils, competition for funding, competition for resources, and now we have a recruitment and retention crisis, competition for staff. Education should be built on collaboration, on equity and inclusiveness, but it's been reduced to a case of dog eat dog in order to survive. And if that was not enough, we have a high-stake, out-of-control accountability system in which everything we, as education professionals, know is important is pushed out or thrown out in the race to get that coveted outstanding in Ofsted. The National Audit Office reported in May that Ofsted itself does not know if its inspections raise the standards of education or improve the quality of the lives of children and young people. Yet they continue to inspect, putting the fear into the hearts of teachers and pupils alike. Well, we can tell them the answer is that their inspections do the opposite. This is not the fault of individual inspectors, but of the system, the inspectorate, and the government. Just close your eyes for a moment and imagine. Imagine an education system which is properly funded, which recruits and retains enthusiastic and committed staff, where learners are inspired and allowed to be creative, where everyone works together, where everyone is encouraged to have great aspirations and is supported to achieve them, and where everyone is a lifelong learner. Take a breath. Yes, it is possible. It is called a National Education Service, and we can have all of this. But in order to achieve it, we need to end and then reverse the privatisation which has caused so much of the current crisis in our education system. We at the NEU have a dream, so please support this motion for the sake of our children and young people, for the sake of our education professionals, both those in the system now and in the future, and help our dream become a reality. I move.
May I call UCU? Thank you.
Colleagues, President, Douglas Chalmers, UCU. Congress, we need to develop an alternative to our fragmented education system in England and Wales, one that recognises that education is a public good and that cost should never be a barrier to participation in learning. Education is devolved, of course, and it differs markedly depending on which jurisdiction we're in. Different exams, different types of schools, and in Scotland, for instance, a 4-year degree with no fees for domestic students, and incidentally, campus trade unions having as a right 2 members on the governing bodies of each university court. However, this proposal put forward by Labour deserves the support of the TUC and has the support of the UCU, as the principles enshrined in it are ones that should be seen as universal, albeit applied by different parliaments differently. This education service would be one where everyone, regardless of age or background, could freely access the learning they need wherever they need it. Now, the principle of fair funding, of course, is central to any successful system. Under the current Westminster government, the burden of cost for English higher education falls heavily on the student, while taxpayers and employers pay comparatively little. The estimated cost of abolishing the fees and loans system varies from perhaps £8 billion to Labour's own calculations of £11.2 billion to scrap the fees and restore grants. So the fundamental question is how to fund the saxing of the fees. We believe employers need to pay more for the supply of skills upon which they rely. While there are very powerful social justice arguments for increasing the amount of education spending through taxation, there's also a strong economic case to reflect the benefits to the economy and to business, rather than just increase the burden to individual students and their families. The UCU would like to see a business education tax to fund the cost of scrapping the higher education tuition fees in England and their Welsh and Northern Irish versions. Fees are now an eye-watering £9,250 per year in England, with students charged 3% plus RPI to pay back loans for the rest of their lives. Average graduate debt is £46,000, which rises to £56,000 for poorer students because they have to borrow for living costs now that maintenance grants are scrapped. So this is not fit for purpose, and neither does it recognise what we need. This can't go on. Please support the motion. Please support these principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I call unison.
Congress President Denise Ward speaking in support of the composite on behalf of Unison. Congress, when was the last time you heard a government minister recognise the vital contribution of support staff in education? This government claims to recognise the vital role of school teachers. They claim to have introduced some measures to support them in their work, though probably this is too little too late for some teachers, as we heard in the previous motion. The government has even less to say about the vital role of early years workers or support staff in schools, colleges, universities or adult education. Yet it is amongst this forgotten 50% of the workforce where the cuts have bitten hardest. Unison's recent survey of over 12,000 school support staff shows 90% had seen cutbacks, 70% were having to carry out duties that should have been done by someone at a higher level, and 35% said they were doing tasks without sufficient training. And the consequences? 83% had experienced stress at work, and 20% had needed to take time off sick as a result. In higher education, many support staff are covering 2 and 3 posts due to caution by universities fearing a drop in income due to the government's review on tuition fees. Unison's Higher Education's Industrial Action Ballot on Pay opens on the 14th of September. This government neither cares about nor understands the benefits of a national education service for all, which is government funded. Thankfully, the Labour Party does. This situation cannot go on. Funding must be found to ensure the level of staff necessary to provide the great education that our children and our young people deserve. We also need to restore sanity to the education system. The fragmented and dysfunctional system that has been created by rag-bag reforms introduced by the coalition and Tory governments has been disastrous. Setting up a national education service would be a huge step forward towards a cohesive education service, one with proper local accountability that engaged with parents, communities and all staff. Congress, Unison's input to this composite was modest but crucial. We ask that a new national education service recognises that every member of staff has a role to play in creating a supportive and stimulating environment in which learners can flourish and achieve their full potential. Thank you, Congress. Please support the composite.
Thank you. Thank you, Unison. I'm looking to you, Annie. I've heard no one opposed, so you waive your right to reply. Thank you. I'm going to call us to the vote on composite 10. Will all those in favour please show? All those against, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. I call for motion 56 on data misuse. The General Council supports this motion. It will be moved by EIS and seconded by NEU. Other speakers include the NASUWT. before you start your speech, EIS, can I just let those people who are preparing to talk on Composite 16, I will be able to call PFA, the Musicians Union, the Artists Union of England, NASUWT, GM. No, I won't be. That's where I'm going to have to actually stop. So GMB and NEU, I have to offer apologies from the platform. We're just not going to have time to fit you in, we think. But I wanted to let you know now so you weren't thinking you were going to be called. EIS, my apologies for making you wait. The floor is yours.
Not at all. Thank you, President. Alison Thornton, EIS, the Educational Institute of Scotland, moving motion 56 on the misuse of data. Education is rich with data. All teachers have huge amounts of data on the pupils they teach. The data is gathered on a daily basis with teachers following a formative assessment process and talking with pupils. This data, along with the teacher's professional knowledge, then informs the next steps in the teaching and learning experiences for their pupils. Teachers see this use of data as helping pupils. However, increasingly, we see moves towards data being collected and used in ways that we as a union have major concerns about. Big data is defined as the collection and analysis of such vast amounts of data that it can only be collected and analysed by mechanical means. The results of this type of data collection analysis is now increasingly being used by the Scottish Government to compare pupils, teachers and schools. The publication of OECD, PISA and other forms of league table-based reports are immediately jumped on by politicians, and so education becomes a political football. The ill-informed comments that are then made on the contents of these reports take no account of the issues that are related to specific schools and usually beyond a school's control. In Scotland, the last school year saw pupils in P1, 4, 7 and S3 sit the new online-only Scotland National Standardised Assessments, known as the SNSAs, and P1 pupils are only 5 years old. The writing assessment tests spelling, grammar and punctuation, all of which as teachers we recognise are very important. But it does not test the ability to write in continuous prose. And the reason for this is because the digital platform that is being used for these assessments cannot process continuous prose. The data collected from these assessments is being processed at a national level for the Scottish Government and is absolutely not a good or meaningful way to support pupils' learning. The use of homework apps in our schools is also growing. However, we are aware that colleagues in the USA and Canada, where pupils routinely do homework tasks online, are now reporting that parents are being inundated with unsolicited emails from companies offering very targeted tutorial support packages. We agree that data can be useful, but it is all too easy for data to be misused, and misuse must be challenged. Please support the motion.
Thank you very much. I think, am I on the NASUWT? No, the NEU, yes? How could I possibly have mistaken you? I'm sorry, the NEU.
Thank you very much, President and Congress. Sarah Tomlinson from the NEU, proud to second this motion on data misuse. The motion talks about the effects of an overemphasis on data in education, and I want to urge our fellow education workers in Scotland, and just having heard what you've said about the introduction of testing into your primary sector does cause concern, because if we look at the disastrous effects that high stakes testing and a reliance on data has had on the schools in England, I can testify to some of the problems that you may see. Some of these effects include the narrowing of the curriculum, a cut to creative subjects, a cut to art, to drama, to technology, to sport, and much more. I'm sure those of you who are parents in the room will recognise that your children's education seems to be narrowing. We have a crisis in teacher recruitment and retention. We have performance-related pay for teachers with a tick box culture. So you can only pay your mortgage or pay your rent if your children meet their targets and pass the tests. And finally, I want to just talk a bit about the huge rise in child mental health. We just heard about teacher and support staff mental health, but child mental health is really at a crisis point too. We are part of a coalition, and I'm on the steering committee, which seeks to stop this obsession with testing and data, and it's called More Than a Score. And I really hope that you will look at it and support us as an individual, a parent, a grandparent, a trade unionist, and particularly as organisations and unions. Now, in England, the government is set to introduce a new formal test in 2020 with a pilot in 2019, and it's for 4-year-olds. And it's to be sat in the first 6 weeks of school. So this big data crunching machine will start from day one when those children enter reception. Those first 6 weeks should be spent getting to know where the toilet is, getting to know how to make friends, relaxing and getting to know your teacher. But that teacher has got to test every single child on a formal test. Now, you cannot reliably test a 4-year-old if you know 4-year-olds. It's not a reliable age to test. But what is that data going to be used for? Will it help to develop the learning of the children? No, it won't. Will it help parents to know how to help their children to move on? No, it won't. Will it help us to assess where we need additional resources in schools? No, it won't. It is data that is going to be put in a black box. It will come out 6 or 7 years later, and it will be then used to judge whether the school, the head teacher, the teacher has made sufficient progress. From a flawed start, it is going to be flawed all the way through. And who knows that companies may get hold of that data. You talked about companies sending you adverts. We know Edubusiness, like Pearson's, would love to get hold of the data of the whole of the nation's 4-year-olds and use it for their profit. So I want to say we should be giving back to teachers and support staff their autonomy to trust teachers, to assess children for the right purpose. I'm going to have to ask you to that are being done currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. NASUWT?
President, Congress, Cathy Duggan, NASUWT, the Teachers' Union, speaking in support of this motion, misuse of data. NASUWT is very clear that our members must not have data used as an appraisal tool against them. We are very clear that our members should not be entering repetitive data. This motion asks the General Council to campaign against the misuse of data in education policy and practice. 84% of NASUWT members, teachers, cite excessive workload as the major factor in contributing towards their stress. The misuse of data in our schools and colleges adds significantly to this stress. The misuse of data, inflicting never-ending input of pointless detail, the misuse of data used as a stick to beat teachers with, an obsession with the bottom data line, the misuse of data, hard, uncompromising numerical recordings, no respecter of pupils' individual circumstances that are out of teachers' control, but used to judge us with. A couple of years ago, the teachers in the primary school in London where I worked were handed shiny new tablets with preloaded target tracker. It's like a little present. This was intended, it was said, to help us with assessment and target setting. We were informed that we could use these devices at home and in our holidays, yet more extension of the workplace into our home life and into our free time. What can I say? The laborious recording of tiny, tiny assessments, tiny, tiny, pointless little targets takes ages and ages. A massive increase in the time spent working was the result. The new systems cost thousands. There is also a concern with all of the systems being used as to who owns the data. And there are implications for data security. There is no evidence at all that the emphasis on electronically recorded data is of any benefit to children's education or learning. It can certainly and unnecessarily add to our workload. People who manage teachers need to desist from insisting that teachers carry out these pointless tasks. Please support the motion.
Thank you very much, NAS. EIS, do you need a right to reply? No, thank you very much. In which case, can I call the vote on motions 56? Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. I call paragraphs 54, 55 and composite motion number 16, music, arts and culture in the curriculum and lifelong learning. The General Council supports the composite motion, moved by the PFA, seconded by the Musicians Union, supported by the Artists Union of England and the NASUWT. Will all of those unions please come to the front for this debate? Thank you. The PFA, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President. Congress, Gordon Taylor, PFA. Gives me great pleasure to move this motion and to say how pleased I am that Congress is here in Manchester, my hometown, and where the TUC began 150 years ago. It's also been really good to see the way that this city has helped with the formation of unions and parties working for working people. Recalling just a short time ago, the meeting in Manchester prior to this, the combination of poetry and art, and the logo to agitate, educate, and achieve. We're in a time when everybody looks for logos, but also to see on the front of the brochure the worker bee and what's been involved in Manchester and how it's resonated throughout the world, the triumphs, the tragedies, next year, of course, being Peterloo. Everyone knows the tragedies that we've been through and the resilience we need to show, and that worker bee stands up for a lot. The same as we have, think about elephants and long memories, the same as we think about meerkats and on the lookout for trouble. The same as like lions, we have a pride in what we do. And the same as like tigers, if our tails are touched or pulled, we will fight like tigers. The PFA was formed in 1907. That was based on the Imperial Hotel Piccadilly, based on Billy Meredith, Charlie Roberts, who when they wanted to form a union and wanted to be part of the TUC, were told that they would be fired. Nobody could play them. They formed a team called the Outcasts. They had the picture taken in the national newspaper. The FA backed down on the understanding that they wouldn't join the TUC, but they could form a union. And that was an acceptable compromise, because of course later on they did. Education. Thinking about football, thinking about the arts, our supporters, and music, that's the finer side of life. But nobody knows better than the PFA how vulnerable our professions are these days. Youngsters of 6, 7, 8 are approached. They tie themselves to clubs. You wonder about how their education will go and whether the parents will be rounded enough to appreciate the fallout rate. 1,500 join at age 16, out of which 5 out of 6 are out of the game by the time they're 21. Even if you make the grade, it's an average 8-year career. So, how important is education? It's the very fulcrum on which the PFA works. The need to prepare, and sometimes I think in this day and age, in a time of falling union membership, sporting unions and sport has displayed its place in the world, the income it can generate, and we've become known as one of the strongest, tied in with the USA sporting unions. But then again, they've always had to have lockouts. We've not done that. We've managed to negotiate with the FA, with the Football League, with the Premier League, to look after that duty of care we have for our members, not just for current members, but for our future members as well. Ex-members, future members, ex-members, some 50,000, and to look after them, ideally from cradle to grave, to quote. But the fact is, education is really that test. It was Nelson Mandela who said the keenest revelation of a society's soul is the way it looks after its children. We need to look after our members, and we need to almost try and set an example if we're going to improve union membership, to make sure that when they join, when they pay, they have something back that they can't afford to ignore, that they are looked after pension-wise, they are looked after education-wise, medical-wise. That's not always easy according to resources. And neither is education all about academic. We were discussing today at a fringe meeting of Show Racism, the Red Card, that sometimes the quality of life, respect, dignity, equalities that deal not just with race, but against homophobia, against anti-Semitism, against Islamophobia, women's equality. We have 2 members on our management committee, the England captain, Steph Houghton. Casey Stoney's now joined Manchester United as manager. Alex Scott qualified, and you see her covering the World Cup. And they're on a panel and being judged and showing pure quality.
Colleague, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up soon. Thank you.
Just in closing, I would want to say, if unions can present education, if unions can work with music and the arts and the finest thing in the world, let's do it, because that way I hope all your membership continues to expand just like the PFAs. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call the Musicians' Union, please?
Good afternoon, Congress. Horace Trowbridge, Musicians' Union. Needless to say, I'm going to talk about the crisis in music education. I come from humble roots, council house, single-parent family, etc. You all know the Monty Python sketch, We Had It Hard. And my secondary school was a chaotic, overflowing, cash-starved comprehensive. I struggled with the traditional subjects, but thankfully, my school had a great music department, and I was given free clarinet lessons. My mum was on a very tight budget, and if she'd had to pay for the lessons, then it just wouldn't have happened. She didn't have the money. That opportunity to learn a musical instrument was my lifeline, and I went on to have a successful career as a professional musician, on the saxophone, actually, Sally. Hit records, world tours, full-on rock and roll lifestyle. And now I'm the General Secretary of a trade union. But seriously, the UK music industry is worth £4.5 billion to the economy. Its product is the soundtrack of our lives, and the industry employs hundreds of thousands of people. It's a vital contributor to tourism in the UK and has massive export value. Now, the preliminary results from the research of the MU Commission show that kids from poorer families are half as likely to get the opportunity to learn a musical instrument compared to kids from well-off families. The fact is that many young people from deprived areas haven't even seen a musical instrument being played, let alone had the opportunity to play an instrument themselves. Is it just coincidence or fashion that draws young people from poor backgrounds to genres of music that are fundamentally just beats and lyrics? Genres like grime, drill, and bashment? Or is it that they have had no first-hand exposure to melodic instruments, let alone the chance to learn an instrument? Of course, we'll still have bands and artists making more mainstream music, but increasingly it will be dominated by those whose pockets are deep enough to pay for the years of tuition and training. That being the case, will we ever see emerging bands like Madness, Pulp, The Specials, Happy Mondays, Primal Scream, Oasis, and all the other fantastic bands from working class backgrounds again, bands that would know how to sing about what it was like to have a tough life? Or will we just have artists and bands from middle to upper class backgrounds? That sounds pretty boring to me. It's not just that this is an uninspiring future to contemplate. The reason that the UK has such a fantastic reputation for great music is because we have traditionally produced a rich, edgy and diverse spectrum of music. But like any industry, changes way down in the supply chain can eventually have profound effects on the overall health of the business. Will we be able to maintain and build on our international standing for music if the musicians of tomorrow come exclusively from a very narrow socio-economic background? How will we ensure that our wonderful orchestras succeed in bringing more BAME musicians into their ranks when the opportunities to achieve the required standards in musicianship only exist for predominantly white middle-class players? In Japan, all school children learn a musical instrument. That is because it is widely recognized that learning a musical instrument is an aid to learning generally. The opportunity to learn a musical instrument should be available to all children in the UK and not just those whose parents can afford to pay for it. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you very much. The Artists Union. Thank you, Lorraine.
Hi, Lorraine Monk, Artists Union England, representing visual, applied and socially engaged artists, supporting Composite 16. Conservative austerity policies have resulted over the years in massive cuts in arts funding, both nationally in schools and colleges and regionally in arts education and arts services funded by councils. This has meant the loss of jobs, not just for artists, but in adult education, in community and museum work. The Tories are happy to have creative arts taught in public schools. They just don't allow them and they're trying to squeeze them out in the state sector. Conference, we have to end this class divide. We need art for everyone, made for everyone, representing everyone. Art subjects, including visual arts, must be included back in the education curriculums for all ages. And we must campaign for increased funding for art education in colleges and further education, reintroducing no-fee courses and funding art education for life, for second chances. We're calling for a campaign for increased funding for regional and national arts organisations that work with local councils bringing art to deprived areas, ensuring there is fair provision everywhere, funding for studio spaces and rehearsal spaces, community centres where there can be painting and sculpture and printing, plays, music, poetry, dance, film. We're calling for a campaign for increased funding for libraries, galleries and museum services in local areas, preserving and sharing our history, the history of the working class, of women, of ethnic minorities and of disabled people. Community cultural centres have the funding and should be to stay open 6 or 7 days a week, not just one day now. And we should have museums where they're displaying everything they've got in storage rather than just the small amount that they show now. Thriving industries are central to our future economic planning, and that will actually benefit everyone. A recent UN report said that the cultural and creative industries account for 3% of the world GDP, employing more people than the car industries in Europe, Japan and the USA combined. We need to actually see a new future for our young, for giving people with talent the opportunities they need, and art and everything that it comes with it, the enjoyment, the pleasure, the creativity, not just for the rich, not just for people in public school, it's for us all to enrich our lives, For our children, it's about planning communities for people to live in, to grow in, and to celebrate culture from across the world that speaks to us of our own situation and of others, to describe and inspire the hopes and fears and dreams of our human experience and our struggles. Please support.
Thank you. And our very last speaker of the afternoon, the NASUWT.
President, Congress, Russ Walters, NASUWT, the Teachers' Union, speaking as an art teacher in support of Composite Motion 59. I'm very proud to say that my union has played such a practical and active role in promoting culture and arts in schools and colleges throughout the country. The NASUWT Arts and Minds competition has, over the last decade now, engaged schools throughout the UK in showcasing the artistic and creative talents and skills of children, young people, and demonstrated the importance of a broad and balanced education that's not focused on chasing results and league table positions. The exceptionally high standard of entries to the competition each year highlights all that's great about schools across the UK and the enormous talent, creativity, ingenuity, and commitment of young people, which is nurtured, encouraged, and supported by their teachers. And this includes the work of many children having special educational needs, who would never perhaps be able to engage at the level to access high academic qualifications, but to see these children achieve success through their own method of expression is an absolute delight in itself. What a tragedy then that central government funding has been reduced to the levels it has in these areas. The consequence of cuts to funding for the arts will mean that many schools no longer able to continue to organise visits that will open young minds to arts and culture. Or it will mean that the only children able to participate in such visits to museums, galleries, to live music will be those children whose parents can afford to pay for it. Research by the NASUWT already indicates that children's access to the arts is based increasingly on parents' ability to pay. How sad in this world. Once again, research by the NASUWT has demonstrated that the provision of arts in the curriculum in schools has been squeezed and the jobs of specialist art teachers have been lost, and as a consequence of the government's ideologically driven reforms. Where will that leave the arts and minds of our young people in years and generations to come? The arts are our shared generation, our shared heritage, and a key legacy that we have a duty to give to our children. Congress, we must defend public investment in the arts and ensure open, universal access to our arts, past, present and future. Congress, we support the motion.
Thank you very much. PFA, I'm looking to you. There's been no speech against. I assume you don't need your right to reply? Thank you. In that case, let me go to the vote. All those in favour of composite motion number 16, will you raise your hands? Thank you. All those against, please show. Thank you, that is carried. And that concludes this afternoon's business. And I want to, before I do anything else, say thank you to those delegates who gave me understanding when I couldn't call them, because it's meant that we got every motion done. So thank you very much. Can I remind delegates that there are various meetings taking place this evening, as ever. They're in the Congress Guide on page 13. It's our 150th, as I said yesterday, and we're returning to the place where our movement first gathered. We were very pleased, therefore, when Manchester City Council said that they wanted to buy us a drink. That's got your attention now, hasn't it? There you go. They're hosting a civic reception for us in the foyer from 5:45 this evening, so in a very few minutes' time. And I'd therefore say don't go back to your hotels. I'd go straight out and have a drink with the Manchester City Council. Can I remind delegation leaders, this is important, this bit, because this is about voting. Can I remind delegation leaders that the ballot for Section D of the General Council takes place tomorrow. Unions eligible to vote for Section D should collect their ballot papers from the TUC information stand, and that's situated in the gallery area of the exhibition on the ground floor from 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Papers will only be provided in exchange for the official delegate form. And note that that closes as a ballot at midday tomorrow. Can you also note that Kate Baker from the CSP has withdrawn from being a scrutineer? Congress, I say thank you again. Have a lovely evening, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, 9:30 sharp. Thank you very much.